Hello everybody, I'm Phil Liggett, joined in commentary later by Paul Sherwin, and welcome to Compiègne, the scene of the 100th edition of Paris Roubaix, an event which spans in fact more than 100 years. It all began back in 1896 when the riders were paced by bicycles and later on by automobiles, and after that they went back to bicycles. But now of course they do it all under their own steam. It's a race of 261 kilometres and the day is simply magnificent. Blue skies, although they say at the moment at Roubaix the rain is still falling. Let's hope it's dry when the riders get there. All of the stars are here, of course, because this is the third round of the World Cup. And, you know, everybody hoping that they might be welcoming the first ever American to win the event, George Hincapie. On 3 occasions he's made a top 6 finish, twice fourth, once in 6th position. He's absolutely flying after a marvellous week's racing here in Europe. Well, as usual, Paul Sherwin is in amongst the riders in the square here in Compiègne, so let's catch up with him first.
You had a pretty strange accident this year. You crashed while you were out training.
Yeah, that's right. Last Thursday I was training just easy after Ghent-Wevelgem. And then there was a big group of, how do you say it, school guys who were coming from the other side and didn't watch out, and we hit each other.
Was there any worry that you might not be able to ride Paris Roubaix?
In the beginning I was worried, but later I went to the hospital, took some pictures, and there was nothing broken. So then I said, yeah, for sure I'm going to start, and then we'll see how it's going.
How's the team today? Because it's always Domo Farm Frites last year totally dominated.
Yeah, that's right. But this year is another year, and I think we have a strong team, but maybe not favorite for the victory. But with Hincapie and Van Petegem, Tafi, yeah, there are a lot of guys who have maybe better chances to win. But if we are strong with the whole team, we can maybe we can get the victory also. Okay, thanks.
Bit cold this morning, Matty.
Yeah, but the weather's clear. So I heard it's been raining last night, and it's still raining now in the final sectors, but we've got a good start today, and it's a lot better than last year anyway.
Georgie seems to be in pretty good shape. Is he accepting the support of the leader of the team, or is the pressure just a little bit too much?
No, I think George has been in this position a few times now, and we didn't give him the help that he deserved last year in Paris Roubaix. We had a lot of accidents, a little bad luck, but if we can have a minimum bad luck and a little bit of good luck, it's going to be a good day for us. George has certainly got the form to win the race today. No worries.
Georgie, the big day. You always get excited for Paris Roubaix. This week has been perfect preparation. Tour of Flanders was good, Ghent-Wevelgem was good, but for you, this is the big one.
Yeah, this is the race I trained for all winter and all season. So I'm definitely excited and I feel good, and I hope for the best.
I believe that you and Lance had a look at some videos this week of the results of Tour of Flanders.
Yeah, Lance and I watched the video of Tour of Flanders, and he had a lot of good things to say and gave me a lot of insight as to what makes him what he is.
He's a special guy to have as a teammate, and today if you can win, you feel as if he will be pushing you along just a little bit, even though he's in the United States?
He's in the U.S., but I know that he's thinking about me, and he'll probably be on the phone with me as soon as the race is over, so I know that he's there with me, and so is the rest of the team. The team's riding great. I got my family here and a lot of my friends at home watching, so it's a big day, and I hope to do well.
The weather is absolutely superb right now. Are you a little bit upset that maybe it's not wet and muddy, or is it all the same for you?
Well, the weather would probably be the same for me either way, but the dry conditions is better for my team, so it'll probably be better for me in the end. Thank you.
Derek, I know you must be nervous today because it's a very important day for the United States Postal Service team, but as an ex-winner of Paris Roubaix, you must also get pretty excited when you come back to this race.
Yeah, always it gives a good feeling if I come back here and Compiègne, star place. So if it's a special race, a special place to remember. For me, it's my biggest souvenir of my whole career. So I'm always excited to come back here.
You'd like to see George Hincapie win today. Everything's been perfect. Flanders was good. Ghent-Wevelgem. He doesn't right now seem to have any problems.
Yeah, he works the whole winter actually for this day. So what we saw when the races were past, he showed that he's right on schedule. He's in his top shape. The team is going a lot better than last year. So I think he's ready. We are ready, and we go for it.
So you've been over to this race several times before. This time you have a good feeling for George?
I hope today's gonna be the day.
The weather's superb at the moment. I asked Georgie, he doesn't care whether it's wet or dry. Everything seems to be spot on.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. Hopefully it's better for the race, and I hope he'll be up front.
It must be a dream for you, because you started life off as a cyclist and then Georgie's followed in your footsteps. But could you ever imagine that Georgie would be a big favorite for Paris Roubaix?
Well, when he was younger, he used to do very good in the races, but I never thought that this was going to be possible. Now I'm very happy because of it.
And a little bit nervous today?
Oh yes, I am. I am. Thanks, Wall.
Well, Stefan, last year was a pretty tough ride in Paris Roubaix for you. You had a little problem with your pedals. Everything okay today?
It was a cleat problem, and this year we fix everything, I hope. And but everything is possible on Paris Roubaix.
It's a kind of race that you and the team are super motivated for, but the team gives you a lot of liberty to ride your own race today.
Yeah, for sure. So Eric and I, we have the same point in the team, and we see what's in the final. Okay, when we're in the final, the last 2 kilometers, and Eric is with me, so I want to do the sprint for Eric. But today it's 260 kilometers, and we see what happened in the race.
What specifically motivates you about Paris Roubaix, because it is a very special race?
Yes, I didn't win the Tour de France, but Paris Roubaix, I feel I can win it. So I have to be here, and I have to be with a good morale and with a good form. Yeah, that's it.
And the weather helps a bit?
For me it's the same as rain or sun, no difference. Thank you.
Is the bike ready?
Johan, the team seems to be in perfect condition today. A little bit of a worry maybe in the week with the crash of Servais Carnarvon, because your team always seems to rely on the strength in numbers.
Friday or Tuesday with Servais has a crash, but I think it's going to be not so hard as we think. So he is on the start, and his condition is good, but the condition from the team is from everybody good, but we don't have the same strongest team as last year, so we have to be another tactic.
I see Wilfred Peters is in the team car today. Is that going to be a bit strange for you to see him on that side of the race?
Not only today, but the whole year. It's different for me. Normally he's in my room and on my side with the bicycle, but now he's backwards in the car.
Johan, your form is always good. You're still very strong. Are you seriously going to retire at the end of this year, or will we see you maybe one more time in the Ronde van Vlaanderen?
We shall see. The museum is always full of surprises.
Peter, last week was Tour of Flanders. The form was good. How's this week been preparing for Paris Roubaix?
I did Gent-Wevelgem for training, and then Thursday we did the last 100 kilometers from Paris Roubaix. Then always resting.
Is your motivation for Paris Roubaix the same as it is for Tour of Flanders? It's one of the big classics, but maybe Flanders you feel a little bit more obliged to win because you're Belgian.
Yeah, but I think Roubaix is almost Belgium also, so Tour de Flanders is, I like more the cobbles and the hills, but I like also Paris Roubaix.
You seem very motivated, very relaxed. I tried to talk to Johan Museo this morning and he's just locked in the car, not talking to anybody.
Yeah, I'm not so stressed, and for me I'm good, so I'm more stressed when the condition is not good. So I will see when I have not a lot of problems. Normally I must have a good race. Okay.
Well, Freddie, right now you're in third place in the World Cup. Are you going to try and go for points today, or are your responsibilities a little bit more with the team and Johan Museo?
Well, my responsibilities are pretty much to be there at the finale. You know, Johan's riding incredibly well. I'm riding well. Servas is riding well. I think with the whole team, as long as we have the numbers there, I think I'll still be able to get points. And who knows? You know, it's my first Roubaix, but I think I have really good legs. Pavé seems to suit me well, and you never know. I mean, I could win the race.
Carnarvon had a very strange accident this week. Was there a worry that he might not start?
No, not at all. I mean, the accident was just more and more bruises and everything else. Just, you know, it just threw him off one day of training, but not much.
Dreams of winning today?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my biggest dreams in my cycling career, and it's my first one, so I come in with the best form I've had in a long time, so you never know. I mean, yeah, I do have dreams.
Well, Max, round once again to the Classics and Paris Roubaix, a race that you've always fancied that you've got a chance of winning.
Yeah, again, I'm here. Good condition, good morale. I don't want to say the same things as every year, but you know, it's such a difficult race. You need so much luck, but I feel really good today. I hope at least in 14 years it could be my day.
You've got a good team around you. Dirksen seems to be riding well. He had a bit of bad luck in the Tour of Flanders. 12 months ago, the two of you worked very well in the Classics.
Yeah, we had a good classic in Tour of Flanders and Roubaix, and you know, the morale is still good. The condition's really good. It's a good day today. I mean, I didn't mind rain, or I don't mind anything. It's just Paris Roubaix is Paris Roubaix. But all I need is a bit of luck. That's all I'm asking for today.
That's the thing about Paris Roubaix. It's not really good luck. It's just not having bad luck.
Yeah, just gunning over the first few sections, 3 or 4 sections with no inconvenience. You know, no flats, no crashes, no nothing. So it's all energies you keep for the end. You know, otherwise you're kind of catching up all the time. You know, at the first sections. So you know, just get over the first 3 or 4 sections of Pavé in good health with a good bike, and then we'll see.
Luda, a brilliant day today for Paris Roubaix. Your teammate Max Chiandri seems to be in good form. You two had a little bit of bad luck last week in the Tour of Flanders, but today's another day.
Yeah, today is another day. It's a beautiful day, but too beautiful perhaps. No, last year it was the weather was bad and the roads were very bad. But this year I think there are some more races who want to win.
But you just love the cobblestones. We've seen you in the Tour of Flanders, we've seen you in Paris Roubaix. Once you get to the cobblestones, you have to give it full gas.
Yeah, it's I love the cobblestones, and one time I want to win Paris Roubaix, and I try to do it, and yeah, we'll see today. I try it.
Well, we hope you win, because we're in the same hotel as you tonight. Maybe we have a big celebration.
Oh yeah, why not?
Yeah, thanks. Excuse me. Pass up. Hey Robbie, the spirits seem pretty good this morning.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, my form's been good up until now. Had a good race in Flanders and Wevelgem, so you know, obviously motivated for today.
Andrea Taffy, since winning last week in the Tour of Flanders, seems to have had a pretty low-key week.
Yeah, he has. But I think Andrea is a lot more motivated than he was before Flanders. He wasn't expecting to ride that well in Flanders. Obviously, then winning it, it's obviously upped his morale a lot more as well for today. So he's confident, and obviously with the team that we've got here, the team's really expecting good results.
Last year, Mappé had a pretty bad time in Paris Roubaix. It's a race that the team has always been super motivated for. Everybody in form now?
Yeah, everybody's in form, and apart from that, you know, the team's getting on well, which I think last year the team was lacking a bit. There was, you know, I think maybe too many captains and a bit of conflict in the team. This year we know what we've got to do, and I think the results will come. Thanks, Paul.
Sono tre bici uguali al piano. La moglie dov'è? Identica la bici. I bambini. Uguale, la stessa. I bambini. Cambia solamente la carta. E il fax? Già fatto.
Well, Andrea Taffy, a very popular man at the start of Paris Roubaix. Today, Andrea, today's a big day for you. Paris Roubaix, maybe you're just a little bit more relaxed after your win last week in the Tour of Flanders. I'm very happy, actually, to have won last week in Tour of Flanders. But I would be even happier because today's one of the races that I really love the most. I'd really hope today that I've got a good race. Your team also is very strong. You've got Zanini, Narnedo, and even the young South African, Robbie Hunter.
Yes,
the whole team are riding very well, very strong at the moment. This year, I think for us that's quite important. For me personally, today there are two objectives. First of all is to win the race, and secondly is of course I'm thinking about the World Cup.
Double fatigué, mais allez, ça va. Merci.
Go, you slowpoke.
Oh, come on, Joe. This is a joke, man. I've never been so late getting away from Paris Roubaix before. It's going to be a great start. All the big guys are here. A big surprise to see Servais Knaven, but, you know, that's Paris Roubaix.
Well, the ride is now well into the saddle of 100th Paris-Roubaix, and as you can see, it was only around 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the start. It's not a lot warmer now, some 100 kilometres down the road. The riders bound for the cobblestones, and it's nice to see, Paul, US Postal have got themselves right on the front of the peloton to start with.
Well, I think they're completely dedicated to the victory today of George Hincapie. Hincapie in great shape, but there is this very early morning breakaway. Right in the middle of the screen there is Robbie Hunter, the South African. He was very relaxed at the start this morning, Phil, and I think today he will be very happy with the situation that he's managed to get himself in that early season breakaway. Tristan Hoffman in there as well, Tom Boonen, the man from Belgium, the young star on the US Postal Service team coming forward. This is a very large group right now, Phil. There are still 19 sections of cobblestones to go, and that's almost 25 miles of those very bad and treacherous roads.
Well, as always, a lot of sections of cobblestones to be conquered, and they come in stretches. As we see the banners coming at us, there's one in the distance there. It counts down from 26 to 0. And the peloton here under the tempo and the command of George Hincapie, because although they've got Tommy Boonen in the breakaway, he's not the man, of course, that is expected to win this race. He's the early season pacemaker for the team. And the cobbles, well, they're probably turning in favour of Ludo Dirksen's here, because they are a lot wetter than I think any of them expected them to be today.
Well, it's a big shock, you know. This rain has come down from Holland and Belgium in the last couple of hours. Most of these riders will have ridden this course, Phil, over the last week, just looking at these cobblestones, and they will have found them completely dry. But very often when the rain comes in at the last moment like this, it makes it so much worse because it makes them very slippery.
Now some hard working being done here. We're now at Maine, 2.5 kilometres of cobblestones here, Pavé sector 9. As we're looking here at Enrico Cassani. Unusual to see a man like Cassani riding so well, but he's proved to be quite a driving power in this breakaway today. Hunter there, taking the rest of the line down the centre of the cobblestones. You've got two places to ride, really, on the edges or on the centre. They are, if anything, the safest sector.
It's great to see Robbie Hunter on the front of this main field as well, Phil. I think a lot more happy now that he's left the Lampre team and come along to this huge big squad of Team Mappé, and he slipped into the role of assistant leader very easily, I think, with his very great start to the season in the Tour de Langkawi.
A chance to see all of the breakaway down there now. A very interesting move, quite a big move this for this stage of the race, as Robbie Hunter has put himself in a very strong position. Now this is a race he is expected by his team to ride pretty well in. Looking down there, the Lotto rider is Hans de Klerk in the red jersey, about 4 men down in the line just now. There's 123 kilometres already covered today of the 256, and Hunter looking as though he just can't be tamed at all today, Paul. He just wants to get this race going.
Well, this is a good move for these guys. They got away in the habitual early morning breakaway of Paris Roubaix, but the fact is this is a very large group, and because it's such a large group, we could in fact see a surprise in Paris Roubaix today, and this group actually surviving to the finish, which is why they're riding so hard just now. They want to try and blow this group apart, because obviously with such a large group, Phil, there are so many riders who will sit on the back. One team who've done very well here, in fact, is the small French team. There you can see Big Matt Aubervilliers. They've actually got 4 riders in this leading group.
Well, there's Cassani on the left. He has a teammate up here as well in Maxi van Heeswijk. Let me just tell you how this breakaway got away at about 144 kilometres from the finish before they got to the first feed at Solem. Cassani, Van Heeswijk, both Domo, Bedrogi of Mappe, Hans de Klerk Lotto, Raphael Schweder of the Team Coast, Tristan Hoffman of Team CSC, Tom Boonen of US Postal. They were the men who set up the action. They've since now been joined by the rest of this breakaway, and it looks to me as though this is a very interesting move here, starting so far out with some good riders in it before we get to the forest itself.
Well, Domo Farm Fritz with the winner from last year, Servais Carnarvon, on the start line, I think we'll be very happy with this situation, Phil. As we look at Enrico Cassani here, he's absolutely hammering over these cobblestones, but they've got a great bike rider in the leading breakaway, and that's Max van Heeswijk. If this group was to stay clear, Max has got a very good chance of winning because he's a very complete bike rider.
Well, that's Tom Boonen down there, the revelation, the young man who has ridden so well, under 23 champion of Belgium, and Johan Bruneel. And there's a rider punctured on there. I think it's Hunter gone. Well, that's bad luck. I'm sure that's Robbie Hunter with a flat tyre.
Oh, that is so unfortunate. You see right now the main field is a long way farther behind this man, and he's getting service from the neutral service vehicle there, that yellow bike there. Robbie Hunter, South Africa, stuck at the side of the road now. Now that is so unfortunate, Phil, because his form was superb. He was riding at the front, and this is a very slow change. It's taken around about 40 seconds so far, so I don't think we'll see Robbie Hunter get back into this group again.
I can't see how he can now. We're about 115 kilometres from the finish here, and our breakaway is down to just 14 from the original 16. I think Danilo Hondo has also come to grief. We didn't see it, but he's no longer here in the breakaway. So that really is bad luck. Hans de Klerk bringing them off that sector of cobblestones, and they're really getting themselves settled into this now. Boonen there doesn't really want to put too much power in this breakaway, of course. He wants to see Hincapie make it up here sooner or later. We've still got 33.7 kilometres of rough road to go. Max van Heeswijk to the right of our picture, his teammate Cassani just on the left of our picture. They're riding very well, and Domo need a good result too.
This is Boonen on the front. This is a man I think we're going to talk an awful lot about in the future. He worked very hard for George Hincapie last week in the Tour of Flanders, and he came up then in the middle of the week, Phil, in Ghent-Wevelgem with a brilliant 7th place. I think this young man, just 21 years of age, is a man that US Postal are going to nurture over the next few years.
Well, chance now for Big Matt, who not part of the Tour de France lineup this year, but hoping for a wild card. This is Sebastian Talabarden of the Big Matt team, sitting at the back here of this group as we're heading on to the what looks like sector, I can't quite read that, looks like sector 15 of the cobblestones. Another greasy sector now, sector 19 it was.
Well, these sections, Phil, for the moment are very long indeed. You can see that's 2,500 metres. That's around about 1.7 miles. But I think it's the latter sections which are going to be much more testing for these riders, because those are the ones which are going to be very muddy indeed. This young man right now is on a suicide mission, I think. Enrico Cassani on the front here. He's thinking about the present of his teammate Max van Heeswijk in this group. Van Heeswijk looking very comfortable. The red and white jersey there is Tristan Hoffman, the big Dutchman, who's having a very good season this year on CSC Tiscali. The team of Tyler Hamilton. Hamilton we expect to see later on in the year, as now he will have to assume the role of leader of that team when we come through to the Grand Tours.
Well, Cassani's only had one win. That was the 12th stage of the Giro d'Italia back in the year 2000. But he had a good result last week in the Tour of Flanders, taking 7th place, so he's going to make the best use of those strong legs by the look of it. He's going to have to hold off the Raiders, because US Postal, although they've got one man up front, they're not expecting him to stay there. They're going to look after George Hincapie. I would say, Paul, the aim to try and get close to the bunch, the breakaway rather, as we near the Forest of Arenberg.
Well, that would be the plan, because that to me is always a very critical stage of Paris-Roubaix. The Forest of Arenberg is not always the place where this bike race is won, but it's a place where you can very often lose all possibility of contact with the front group. So the main field will pick up their accelerations as we get closer to the Forest of Arenberg and try and blow the race apart. But you know, the main breakaway of the day is looking very serious right now, with two very strong riders from Domo Farm Frites in there.
Little chance to look at the cobbles here. The rain is still coming down, not very heavily, it's just in the wind really at the moment. You see one or two of the umbrellas there, but the wind is quite strong. It's head to cross, it's not that favourable just now. And this little stretch of cobblestones here behaving itself for the moment. Best way is down the middle. If you look to the right or left, you come off the edge of the cobblestones, and they are real traps for the bike rider. The small wheels, when they try to come back onto the cobbles out of the ditch, often they slip and slide and down they go.
Well, there's another problem
looks
there.
like somebody's gone down here. This will be the big Matt rider in trouble now. This will be Talabarden.
Well, that's bad news for them. They had 4 riders in that leading group, and again a very unfortunate slow change for this man. In fact, it's Sivakov who's got in there. They've got 4 riders in this leading group, and they've had that just reduced now by 1. There is confirmation, it is the Russian rider.
Yep.
But that was a slow change for him, and another man who's probably not going to see the front of the bike race again today.
Well, I suspect too, even the mechanics changing wheels, the hands are going to be pretty cold here to get those wheels in quick. This is indeed Alexei Sivakov, the Russian rider on Big Matt, and as Paul has said, they're well represented up here, but they are hoping, and I think it's an extreme hope, to get a wild card place in the Tour de France.
Well, they have another good man in that leading group, a man who's been a professional for an awful long time. We've seen him many times on the roads of the Tour de France, Thierry Gouvenou. Looking at the front here, this is Max van Heesewijk. Right behind him is Boonen. There's another Mappé rider a little bit further back there. So this group now just recovering a little bit, Phil, once we've come off the cobblestones.
Oh, good old Max. He's been around a while now, but he's a great bike rider. Stage winning the Tour of Spain a couple of years ago. And they're not overextending themselves here. In fact, 1 or 2 now trying to assess what the situation is here and looking who is still around them. Originally they were 16 leaders, but they've thinned down a little bit now, and all because of flat tyres, of course, and they've been passed down the bunch. And it's a shame about Robbie Hunter, because really poor old Robbie wants one day to survive this without any bad luck, because I think he's a real candidate, a sort of bike rider who could win this race. But here we are now, 119 kilometres. It's a long way still to ride to the finish, and believe me, this is not going to be the composition of the winning group.
This is Thierry Gouvenou on the front right now. We've seen him so many times in the past. The Mappé rider there, just in 3rd position, he's a man we need to watch out for in the future as well. That's Laszlo Bodrogi. He's a brilliant young bike rider. I think a bit surprised that he's lost his teammate in this breakaway situation. But today Mappé will be thinking about a couple of their riders who are on excellent form right now. Andrea Taffi and of course Stefano Zanini. But they're back in the main field at the moment.
And this is the front group here. Good hard working group. Most interesting attack, this one, because 1 or 2 riders have good reputations. It is not the usual throwaway group that we've come to see in the early stages. Could be a very dangerous group, this. Heading on now to Pavé 18. As the figures go down, then we get closer to the finish. And this is now a very nice, and a bit of trouble here at the back, and it looks as though the Rabobank rider's got himself a few problems.
Well, I think the big dangerous thing that happened today was they allowed a group of almost 30 riders to go off the front of the main field, and that is a difficult group to pull back. There's also a bit of tactical manoeuvring going on in the back, because I think Domo Farm Frites are quite happy to have Max van Heesewijk in this leading breakaway right now, because he's got great form for the moment, and they will sit back and wait and see if it all comes back together. Servais Canava, we know, had that terrible injury in the middle of the week. He actually had a silly crash while out training. He actually crashed with a bunch of school kids out on the road, and initially, Phil, he actually thought that he'd broken his elbow, and we for one certainly thought he wouldn't be on the start line today. So it's good to see the defending champion here, but for the moment in the main field.
Well, certainly if he had not been the defending champion, he wouldn't have bothered to turn up, but he felt obliged, and we thank him for that. The rumour was absolute on the eve of the race he was not coming, and so we were very surprised when we saw him ride across the town square to sign on. But here we are, and it looks as though they're getting back on this occasion at least. Sven Nys, who's a very good cyclo-cross rider, should be enjoying these conditions here as they slowly move back up to this group at the back of the field, because just look at the length of that bunch now. They're in big trouble here at the back.
It's quite strange actually, after certain certainly after so many sections of cobblestones, to have such a large group intact. But it will be very difficult in the last hour of racing as we zigzag across the north of France, because the wind will change at so many times, from headwind to tailwind to crosswind, and that's when I think this race will absolutely be blown to smithereens. It is a very difficult day. Strangely enough, you can see almost blue skies, but this rainstorm that came through has done enough damage to make this a very tricky and treacherous course. And this shot here gives you an idea of just how fast these bike riders are going right now, Phil. I remember one year when I didn't take part in Paris Roubaix. It was a race that I always loved, but I was injured on the Thursday beforehand, and I went to watch this bike race from the side of the road, and I was amazed at how fast the bike riders go. Actually, on the machine, you don't get any idea that you're going as quickly as this.
Yes, they clatter their way through and hope their equipment holds up, and is up to the day. If we go back up to the leaders now, there's still 14 of them left on the frontier. Bedrogi of Mappé, and nice. Everybody seems willing to work and keep this pace nice and steady, to organise themselves and keep it going. Very important, this. It's Tom Bach down there, the champion of Lithuania, or Latvia I think it is, and Pedro Horillo is the other Mappé rider in this breakaway.
Mappé will be happy with this situation, although for the moment their big names are at the back of the race. Andrea Taffi and Daniele Nardello and Stefano Zanini. This group now has been reduced in numbers, and that's exactly what they wanted, Phil. That's why they hit the first section of cobblestones just as hard as they could. Once you reduce the numbers in the size of a group, then you're going to get more participation at the front end from everybody, because they now realise they've got a very good chance of surviving if they stay together and work as one unit.
Still approaching, of course, the infamous Forest of Arenberg. We're not there yet, and the weather has not abated at all. We keep going through these little rainstorms, then it goes off, then we catch up with it again, because we keep changing our direction without making a great deal of progress at times, it seems. And they're saying now 4 minutes 38 back to the peloton itself, which is down to about 70 riders. And in that group, and in fact doing most of the work, US Postal with their man George Hincapie still in a very strong position. They're the 14 men. We've just lost from this group Danilo Hondo and Robbie Hunter, both with flat tyres, and that's a shame. But you see the echelon forming, indicating it's a slight crosswind here, diagonal wind across the course, and the riders just doing through and off, keeping the tempo nice and steady, nice and high, and I think they're doing a pretty good job, and this is a most interesting formula for today's race.
There's Nico Matin, the Cofidis rider, right in the middle of the field there. Enrico Cassano very urgently always coming to the front. At Haspera now, 116 kilometres to go. We keep getting information, Phil, that at the front of the main field the work is being done by the US Postal Service. Now I think that's just a little bit too early to start really taking control of this bike race. I would have thought that they wanted to conserve as much energy, to have as many people with George Hincapie for as long as possible, because after all that's always been George's weakness in the past, not having any teammates up alongside him in the finales.
Yes, I agree. There are other teams also want to win this race, and like Domo, for example. And oh, there's a puncture here. Is this Max van Heeswijk who's gone down? Looks like it could be. They're saying it's Johan Museeuw, so we're obviously back with the bunch here. This is Johan Museeuw with a flat tyre at Hasp. Good change for him, and now let's see how he gets on. There's no sign of any teammates waiting for him. Bit of an empty road ahead, but he's up and running.
There's no sign of any panic either. This man, the Flemish Lion, certainly has been in this situation many times before. You see, he's not even relaxing. Look at the way he's got his glasses perched on the end of his nose right there. He waited for the moment to have the team car fill right behind him, takes out the front wheel. Not an inch of panic at all in this man, but you can be certain the information has gone through to the team, and they will be dropping men back one at a time. A couple of years ago, Johan Museeuw had an awful lot of bad luck in this bike race, and in fact he's picking his way through the cars nice and carefully for the moment. Just one teammate there in front, slowing down to pace him back into the group.
Absolutely perfect, and as Paul says, no panic, sign of a very experienced professional. Pavé sector 17 here now. Museeuw very smartly back in the group, but having to decide what to do about this breakaway of 14 men just now, as they continue to lead, as they have done now from very early on. This is 1,700 metres, this stretch of cobbles here at Hasp. Line astern, you can't really get by riders on cobblestones. You just sit there and keep making the pace and following the wheels in front. Otherwise, you start bouncing off the roadside like Tom back there.
Well, looks like Servais Carnarvon there just in front of Johan Museo. He's waited for his team leader and captain, and he's pacing him back to the front end of the main field, because Museo, an experienced man as he is, will not want to sit at the back end of this peloton. And strangely enough, at the start this morning, it was very interesting to note the man in the team car for Domo Farm Freak today was none other than Wilfred Peters. Now that's a big change for Wilfred Peters, who last year was the serious animator of this bike race.
Yes, he most certainly was. And in fact, Museo was saying how much he misses him now in the bike racing scene, because they used to room together in the hotels at night. But age catches up, of course, and Peters is out this year, and no doubt Johan Museo in the next 2 seasons will also have retired. Back to the leaders here now. Tombak is the man choosing his own little trail up on the right there, as we look at the others all sitting nicely in a straight line.
It's actually good to see Tombak riding so well, because I do believe he had a little talking to from the team management over the last couple of days. Alain Bondu, who's his team manager, and also, as you know, Phil, my best man, was there at the team hotel to have a word with Tombak, who he felt was not being quite as serious as he should be. And it looks as if that talking to has worked, because he's found himself today in the leading breakaway.
Well, good for him, because he's wearing the champion jersey of his country, and everybody wants to do that credibility, or give that credibility rather. It's amazing how we were standing in the square in rather nice conditions. We did not envisage that the weather was going to turn quite so badly as it has done, but the rain now fairly persistent, and this breakaway has made a good move. Here's Tombak, the rider we've been talking about, just hanging on to the coattails now.
Well, he's at the back there. It's a very dangerous position to ride too, because you're at the risk of the rider in front of you deviating very smartly out of the way and being left with a hole right in front of you. So that's the worst place possibly to ride. The best place is right in the middle of the cobblestones, if you've got the strength, that is, to be able to do it. And some men who keep consistently going to the front are men like Tristan Hoffmann, who's in this breakaway, Phil. He's a very good bike rider, and I think having one of his best seasons. The two Mappe riders now at the back of that group seem to be suffering a bit of difficulty. Kansani on the other side there, he's taking a few risks as well, riding along that very slippery, slick line of mud down the edge of the cobblestones.
An Italian riding high, turned professional back in 1997, he's having a great season this year, 7th in the Tour of Flanders. One of the few Italians rides on a foreign team, of course, because he rides the Belgian Domo team. That's the rider on the far left of our picture, blazing his own personal trail. This is Tombak here, just hanging on. Very difficult to follow here. He doesn't see any of the pitfalls coming his way, and there's mud there which will be thrown up into his face. The best place to be, if you can hold it, is on the front.
Well, Murillo is having a bit of difficulty here, Phil. You see that acceleration right now. And the thing about riding the cobblestones is once you start to weaken, it's really a question of no lights and no sound at all. In fact, it wasn't a problem with his legs, it was a problem with his bike there. He stopped at the side of the road. The neutral service is right in alongside him. They're trying to change his rear wheel. And once again, because of these very dramatic conditions, these wheel changes seem to be taking forever.
That's just a shame again. Another man being left on the roadside, and he's getting pretty upset here. There's the flag of Flanders as the leading riders go through. And again now they're down to 13 riders now, but I don't think Harillo is going to get back on this, Paul.
He's going to have a hard time because they won't slow down and wait for him. If you do have a problem, the worst place to have it is actually on the cobblestone section, because once you get onto the smooth part of the road, the other riders pick up their pace, and it's so difficult and dangerous at the back because all the cars are coming by you. The difficult thing too is picking up your momentum, and he seems to have got a problem. And in fact, I don't think the chain is on right now, and he's not very happy with that at all.
It is a mess, I'm afraid, and Pedro Harillo is not going to get back now. He's sorted the chain problems out. He's still ahead of the field, of course, but this has cost him, I would say, 45 seconds or so. He'll be lucky to bridge that back. In the distance there is the crowd. You can see the helicopter way ahead. Well, that's where the riders are now. It's flying above the leaders.
He's back in the main field, and it's still Phil on the front end of the main field, the blue and red jerseys of US Postal Service, trying to set something up for Georgi Hincapie, but they're still around about 4 minutes in arrears of that leading breakaway. It's going to be difficult, I think, for them to pull that breakaway back before the Forest of Arenberg, but still for the main field. There's a crash at the back here. This is the chaos. This is the fighting for position. There's a rider from Faso Bortolo gone down there, and you can see, in fact, there is Jans Koorts, the champion of Holland 2, who's got a bit of a problem.
Yes, he looks as though he's hurt himself there, poor old Jans, Dutch road racing champion. A little bit of a shunt at the rear of the peloton. Jans will be okay when he can sort his chain out. That's a real shame. We've also had messages that Eric Zabel has had a flat tyre in that group as well. So there's another big name having problems once more this year. Now look at we swing to the back of the race here at the moment. This is Karsten Kroon, who was in the leading group and is now beginning to lose ground. It looks as though there's one or two going backwards now, because this is Ludovic Auger. I think it was Ludovic Auger also coming away from the leading group. So the distance now is hurting them, and they're having a job going with the pace on the sectors of Pavé as we try and get through here up to besides the car here of the organisation.
Get an idea to see just how difficult it is on these cobblestone sections, and it really is a pretty sight. That's a sight very reminiscent of the Tour de France right now. That group fill all of the time now being reduced in numbers when we go over the cobble sections, and a lot of that really is due to the accelerations on the front of that man from Italy, Enrico Cassani. But it's amazing to see that this young 21-year-old Belgian from the US Postal Service is in there right now. Now this is great for George Hincapie, because hopefully if the plan unfolds correctly, we'll see Hincapie coming out of the group when we come to the Forest of Arenberg, and then he'll have a teammate in the front, Tom Boonen, who's riding superbly over this last week of Belgian Classics. And this in fact is his last race before they put him to rest for a month, and at 21 years of age I think he's had a brilliant start to the season.
Absolutely. Well, that would be the perfect solution for sure. 30 kilometres, 19 miles still to run on cobblestones. There's a nice picture of Tom Boonen on the front there, discovered a couple of years ago by Johan Brunel, and now he's starting to come good as a first-year pro. You can go over his shoulder there. Checking out the opposition is Nico Matan. He's here for the Cofidis team.
He's a dangerous man.
Here.
He's a dangerous man to get in a breakaway like this, because we've seen him ride so well in the past in Paris Roubaix and of course in the Tour of Flanders. And if you give him a 3 or 4 minute advantage by the time this race gets to the Forest of Arenberg, that's a very good possibility for that man to come up with the surprise win. He's got a teammate in the main field as well, who's also a contender for today's race. That's Joe Plancart. But back with the main field at zone number 17, it's still in control of the main peloton, the US Postal Service, and they are not eating into the advantage at all. You saw there, 4 minutes and 28 seconds.
Looking up at the leaders, I think, yes, we are back with the leaders now. The roads are getting quite slippery here. And there's another puncture on the left of the road. I didn't catch who it was, Paul, but he's gone from the breakaway. Or
I think, in fact, this is a group
in
between, yeah, because that's Joe Plancart on the right-hand side there, and this is the chaos of the main field. You can see just having a bit of a difficult time there as well was Stefan Bart, who was the leader of the small Saint-Quentin team. He actually raced with Lance Armstrong's US Postal Service team, and he seems now to be slipping slowly down the ladder, a former national champion of France.
He got caught out there, and once you're on the side there, you're in big trouble now, as these are all the riders now, all sorts of difficulty, not just the distance now, but everything else. This is Garrick Garden. He was up with the leaders, and now we're looking here at the race beginning to fragment. This to be expected. They've lost all of their coordination for the moment, and we're not too far away now from entry into the forest.
Well, that's going to be a big charge, but these guys will survive today, Phil. They will go into the Forest of Arenberg in the first few places because they still have a huge advantage over the main field. Always riding fairly close to the back is Thierry Gouvenou, but he's a very clever rider. We've actually seen him in the early morning breakaway in Paris-Roubaix in the past, and he survived to finish high in the standings. There you can see Laszlo Bodrogi, a brilliant young bike rider, had a very good start to the season this year with a win in the opening prologue of Paris-Nice. But this group, whenever they get off the cobblestones, are doing a good job. They're getting themselves together, getting themselves organised. The black board on the right-hand side there, you can see still indicating over 4 minutes their advantage over the main field.
13, a baker's dozen now left of the original breakaway, and Tom Boonen still driving on at the front, which is interesting to note, hoping that they will get into the forest first. He's hoping, of course, US Postal eventually will close this down, but not with the whole peloton, preferably with just a group of them to start what could develop into a winning move.
Well, they'll all be getting nervous in the main field right now. Hincapie's got some pretty strong guys to help him out on this race today. Pavel Podrinos, who used to be a lead-out man for Mario Cipollini, has now come across to the US Postal Service. This is Thierry Gouvenet at the back, wearing number 231. A sensible rider, very experienced bike rider. We've seen him at the Tour de France. He's keeping himself right now topped up with as much food as possible, because you certainly don't want to crack, especially on a wet, cold day like this. You really seem to have to eat just that little bit more than you would normally.
As well, Gouvenet will have his 33rd birthday in May, which isn't too far away. And he's been a pro then now for, this will be his 11th season, 12th season as a pro. He turned pro back in 1991, Thierry Gouvenet, so he's had a very good long career. Not a big winner, he's only had a couple of wins throughout his career, but he's been a pretty reliable teammate.
You see the rain starting to come down once again. Nico Martin is dressed up for the really cold days there, with a ski hat over the top of his head, keeping himself as warm as possible, looking very strong and confident there as well. But I think at the moment, once we get to the smoother sections in between the cobblestones, the order of the day is to eat as much as possible. There's Van Heeswijk in the blue jersey of Domo. A brilliant bike rider, Max Van Heeswijk, and also a very interesting character too. Before he turned to the sport of professional bike racing, he actually possessed a black belt in karate.
So the answer is don't mess with Max, I would say, and that's, if that's the case, Paul. Looking here at the back of the race now, back of the breakaway rather, this is the team coast rider Raphael Schweder, who's he's done some. Is it the back of the race? Yes, this bunch is so big that at the moment it looks as though it was the bunch from that angle. This is Laszlo Bodrogi, number 33 there, the Lotto rider. Hans de Klerk, been in the break since the outset today. Still got a couple of big mat riders here. Numerically, they're in a good situation, because like a lot of the French teams, they're not in the Tour de France yet. And frankly, I don't think they'll be part of the wild cards anyway, unless they pull off some rather spectacular performances in the next couple of events.
Well, there are a lot of teams vying for selection at the Tour de France later in this year. Teams like Team Coast, who I think during the early season classics have been very good indeed. We have to wait and see how they perform in the stage races that will indicate whether they can be competitive at the Tour de France. Races like the Pays Basque race and Dauphiné Libéré. Then after that, we'll get an idea as to whether or not they will garner selection.
Now, this is Nicolas Libero as the big mat
Actually,
rider
this is
here,
a chaseaway. This is a group coming across. This is Joe Plancart, who a few moments ago they'd said was in difficulty. Well, right now he's in a small three-man group, Phil, trying to get himself across to the breakaway. Now, this is a good move by Joe Plancart. He's actually not waiting to be dragged up to the front breakaway by the US Postal Service train, and he's slipped away from the main peloton.
Well, hats off to Plancart. He's a man who's almost made it this year, but hasn't yet delivered with the goods. Paul van Heeft is another rider in this breakaway, and this rider here, Joe Plancart, will be happy to work with him, because it could steal a march and put him up in the lead group before any of the fancied men get up there. Good move by Joe, but he's so close to winning big races, Joe, but he's always in the second or thirds when he gets to the line. There's always somebody who actually gets the better of him just before the line there. The Tiscali rider, Paul van Heeft, good strong workhorse, he's up there as well. Back with the breakaways, the men they are trying to reach were slowly but surely heading in towards the forest now.
Well, there's still 14 very strong riders at the front end of this bike race, but it seems to me now, Phil, as if the turns that are being done at the front are not quite as hard and in earnest as they were just a little while ago. This breakaway, when it originally formed, was 33 riders strong, and since then it's slowly but surely been whittled down to a small nucleus of men prepared to work hard. Over 100 kilometres to go as we head through Denain. In fact, they've got to do a fairly large little loop around Denain, with the main field closing in a little bit, but not fast enough to 4 minutes and 7 seconds.
Yes, it's the old story. They're nibbling away at it, but they're not rushing at them. They'll want to see, though, where they stand when they get to the forest, because many people feel that's where the race begins. Once you traverse the forest, then you're facing up to more or less a 100-kilometre run straight down to the finish. But of course, all the cobbles there as well. Now, back at the team car here. This is Thomas Eriksson of CSC Tiscali, and that looks like Bjarne Riis in the driving seat today, the man who won the Tour de France back in 1996.
Bjarne Riis now driving the team car, a very experienced man, and he's come into the top of the CSC Tiscali team. And in fact, he went out and stuck his neck on the line last year and signed up Tyler Hamilton across from the US Postal Service. and he'll be looking after Tyler when he comes up to ride in the Tour de France later on this season. This group now, Phil, I think will wait until they get to the Forest of Arenberg, and then once they come out of the forest, they will see what the composition of the group looks like and wait to get information from behind. Just there's another problem about Kasani stopping at the side of the road there. He was very quick there. He pulled up. He saw, in fact, that there was the yellow neutral bike right behind him, and he stopped at the side of the road. In fact, you're supposed to stop on the left-hand side of the road, but in such chaos in Paris Roubaix, sometimes the judges look the other way. He's got a quick bike change now, a wheel change. He's in there, and with a bit of luck, very shortly he'll be back in the group with his teammate Max van Heeswijk.
Well, big effort required from Enrico now to put himself back in, but he's got great legs just now. It's been a good few weeks for him in the bike game, and he's going to make the most of that as he tries to get back on terms. He chose the smooth section of road, or I think the problem probably came on the cobbles, but he held it long enough to get a good bike change. He's now nearly into the convoy of cars, and then he can work his way through up back to that leading group. Don't think it'll be a problem for him this time. He's not too sure which way to pass around this car at the moment. A bit of a traffic jam up front in these narrow streets as we're heading up towards the area of Wallers and the Forest of Arenberg. Kasani now sensing that he's on the tail of the convoy. He just breathes between cars, you see, a few deep breaths, and then races around them, another deep breath, and keeps on going till he rejoins the front group. At the minute we've got some 13 riders, but we've only got 12 at the moment up there. 12 riders as we look down, 104 kilometres, no more than that now from the top, from the finishing line. And I can tell you that the weather too at the finish is still pretty grim as well, so there's no rest for them just now. And they look as though they've been on Paris-Roubaix now. One or two of the riders looking quite dirty here. There's Boonen coming through, still got his long sleeve jersey. Max van Heeswijk cruising through on the inside. Great guy Max when you meet him. He speaks very, very good English, and always seems to have a twinkle in his eye when he talks to you. This is Kasani, hats off, good chase, and there is Tom Boonen taking a little break on the left, but of a different sort, and he sensed perhaps a little relaxation here in this breakaway group now as they prepare to enter the forest, and that might be interesting. Thomas Eriksson was the rider there from CSC, again trying to do something about this move.
Well, I think they'll back off just a little bit now, Phil, because they realise they're coming up to the Forest of Arenberg, and it's a section of cobblestones which really strikes fear into the hearts of most bike riders, even the most earnest of bike riders. Men like Johan Museo has got some terrible memories about the Forest of Arenberg. It nearly cost him his life a couple of years ago. So all of these guys, I think, will just back off a little bit, try and recuperate. Maybe it's a good time for a drink and something to eat to get themselves psychologically prepared for what is an unbelievably treacherous section of road. It's about 2.5 kilometres in length, but it seems to take forever. Kasani now reporting back to the team management to say, well, there you go, had a flat tyre, back in the main field, no problems, thank you very much. Forest of Arenberg coming up next.
He's probably saying, where on earth is Johan, because we could do with some help up here. Meanwhile, back in the cavalry department, this is the main field. There's only around 60 of them left already here, believe it or not, and it is the US Postal doing a lot of work, and I hope they're not overworking here.
Antonio Cruz on the front there, a brilliant young bike rider. I think really enjoying the fact that he's working here with some top men. Stefano Zanini very much up there as well. The leading group of 14 rider going through this section now, section number 16 at Haveluy, 2.5 kilometers in length. This is a new section right now. They will tackle this, and this, I think, is a very difficult and muddy section.
Well, let's have a look how they do ride it here now. They're just hitting it and riding on Raphael Schroeder here, giving it his best legs as he hits it full speed. This man's had one very good performance in his life, second in a World Cup race. Other than that, he's just a very solid bike rider, but he is a strong bike rider, and Team Coast are looking for a place as a wild card into the Tour de France. You see the cobblestones here, you can't really see them at all, can you, because they're strewn with mud just now. Here's Schroeder, a German rider from Nuremberg, and Kasani, or it might be Max van Heeswijk there, and this is Eriksson. See, they're all riding their own private race down there, Paul, aren't they?
Well, there's Van Heeswijk going through right now. There's Tristan Hoffman. Nico Martin riding a little bit towards the rear, which is a bit of a surprise. You see the team car there just off to the left-hand side. Well, in this race, as in the Tour of Flanders, very often the teams, Phil, will send cars forward to different sections of cobblestones to be in place just in case their bike rider has a mechanical problem. Because if you don't get a quick wheel change, as we have seen on one or two situations so far, then you're completely and utterly out of the bike race. They will check and wait for the longest section of cobblestones, and the cars will leapfrog forward throughout the day.
Looking at the race then, we are not very far away. Those little hills in the back really are not hills at all, they're lumps of old coal slag, and that's the area we're in now, and very shortly we'll be seeing the famous entrance to the pit head as we go past what is now a mining museum. And there's also some little pieces of artifacts there on Paris Roubaix as well, because the race always goes past as we enter the forest of Arenberg. It's a unique area of northern France, this.
I thought there'd been a crash just there for a moment. There were a whole load of spectators cutting across the diagonal of the road there to see the bike race on 2 occasions. Schweder wasn't worried about that at all. He's just setting his own private tempo on the front. And this is the best way to ride the cobblestones, because you are the person dictating the pace which is comfortable to yourself. And this pace doesn't seem to be too comfortable for 1 or 2 other riders in this leading breakaway. Kasani just surviving there. You see how he's riding down the middle of the road. Schweder looks over his shoulder to see what sort of damage he's doing right now, and he realizes that the next section of cobblestones out on the road is going to be the very important forest of Arenberg. But they're recovering slowly and starting to claw their way back to this man.
You can see in the distance there, the car headlights are still on, indicating low cloud and rain off the, well, it's largely spray at the minute, off the wheel of the bike riders in front. But yes, these riders now are trying to survive into the forest, then they'll reassess what their advantage is. At the minute, it's 4 minutes and 8 seconds. That's the gap over the chase of what is left of the big peloton. And I think that's a nice, healthy lead to have as they approach the forest.
Well, once they come off this section of cobblestones, they will then head around the town of Valenciennes. And from Valenciennes... Oh, there's a problem there! I don't know how that... Unbelievably, he stayed upright. That was incredible. I think our cameraman there must have had a heart rate of about 250 for a moment there.
That was Sébastien Talabardon of the French team. He did well there. I bet he felt a bit shocked. Watch this, he has to wrench his foot off that pedal quickly, because I was telling you earlier about the lip of the cobblestones on the mud, and if you get stuck in that mud and try to get your bike back on the cobbles, then you are lucky if you don't crash, and he would have gone down absolutely beneath the wheels of our camera motorbike. So Sebastian can breathe again, happily so. This is now the pace being forced by the very strong German here, Raphael Schweder, and the immensely strong Italian rider too, Enrico Casani. They are really forcing the issue here for the others to follow.
Well, Casani doing a great job. He's actually having a brilliant season of these classics. He rode very well last week in the Tour of Flanders, but right now I think much more a defensive role for him though, Phil. He's thinking much more of Johan Museo in the back, surveys Carnarvon if he's recovered, and of course Freddie Rodriguez, who is riding very well at the moment for the Domo Farm Freach team. I think Freddie will be given his chance today of possibly riding for himself.
I reckon you're right, because Freddie is doing very, very good. As we get up to continue on this 2.5 kilometre stretch now at Haveluy, zone pavé number 16. 16 pavé stretches, including this one, still to go. And still Schweder has had a very good spell this last 5 or 10 minutes or so, leading the race. And Enrico Casani, adrenaline still running from his puncture, is right up there with them as well. But you can see how these stretches have now spread eagle this breakaway. Little bit of a chance to recover, regroup here, because the next stop are going to be in the forest.
Well, it's going to be a long and difficult section right now. These two leaders, I think, will look over their shoulders and realise they haven't done the damage they wanted to, and they will wait. That would be the most sensible tactic right now, to wait for the other 12 riders to come back onto their tail, because we have a long section of around about 8 or 9 kilometres before we charge into the forest of Arenberg.
So there we are. Casani looks over his shoulder. Schweder takes a well-earned rest, because all that effort hasn't done a lot of damage to the breakaway, as they sort of reformed now. And still we can see at the back there, having a little chat with the Domo Farm Freach manager to see what the situation is behind. This is the rider who almost fell, having to regroup here, Talabardon from the Big Mat team. He's slowly getting back in. He'll get back safely on this occasion, but he's going to have to go through it all again once he gets to the rather severe cobbles in the forest, where the usual big crowd awaits. But they barrier them off there now. They don't close in on the road like they used to in the years gone by.
Well, he's having a hard ride to get onto the back end. He's using a monster gear right now to try and get himself up there. I don't think he'll have any trouble at all, Phil, because that front group of what is 13 riders right now are not really hammering. They're waiting for the big scenario to come, and that scenario is going to be the Forest of Arenberg, and that's when the race really does start to get really good fun.
So the field are regrouping as we head up towards the Forest of Arenberg.
These guys here, Phil, certainly have a huge advantage right now because, in fact, we are heading up to Wallers-Arenberg, and they will be the first riders to go in there. And in the main field, it will be absolute chaos when they charge into the Forest of Arenberg, because all of the main leaders and all of the big favourites before the start of the day are in that group behind, which is currently around about 4 minutes in arrears.
Now this is the sector 16 here at Haveluy, and this is the main field who are now crossing in pursuit of those 14 breakaways. We did have a couple of Telecom riders in that breakaway, but gone now is the sprinter Danilo Hondo. He was dropped, and leaving only Andreas Clear up there. There's the latest gap coming to us now. 4 minutes and 7 seconds. As far as we know, Paul, none of the favourites have missed this big split in the peloton. Museo's here, Fred Rodriguez, Eric Zabel, they're all still there, and of course George Hincapie.
All of the big names are in the main peloton right now, but nearly all of those big names you mentioned, Phil, have had mechanical incidents out on the course. As you said, Freddie Rodriguez, 2 flat tyres for him. There's another problem at the back here. Looked like one of the Faso Bortolo riders having a problem. Rodriguez with 2 flat tyres, Museo already with 1 flat tyre. Just a few moments ago, we saw Eric Zabel just getting back onto the tail end of the main field. This, for the 100th anniversary of Paris Roubaix, is certainly going to be a very dramatic one.
Well, there's going to be quite a slippery old passage through the Forest of Arenberg very shortly. We're now seeing US Postal. Paul is very concerned that the Postal team are working a little bit too hard here to keep Hincapie in touch, and they're doing Museo a favour, we feel.
I think they are doing Museo a big favour right now. They've done an awful lot of the work to try and make sure that the advantage doesn't exceed the 5 or 6 minutes mark as we rejoin the rear end of the field. You can see just how slippery these cobblestones are today. It's because the rain has come down after about 10 days of unbelievably warm weather in the north of France. Not very normal for this time of the year, but the temperatures have dropped down. It's only just above freezing for the moment, and this first coat of rain in 10 days is making the cobbles very dangerous.
It's true, you know, psychologically, I think this will hit many of the riders in this race, simply because they weren't expecting this after 10 days of glorious sun, especially for Gent-Wevelgem and the Tour de Flanders and their training round here. And it seemed it was going to be set fair all of the way to Roubaix. And then just as the riders rolled out of Roubaix, back came the telephone message to say it was raining at the finishing line, which we could hardly believe. Well, as we drove to the finishing line, the weather changed dramatically. The cloud came in, rain began to fall quite heavily, and that's the way it's staying at the moment. The only good news for the riders just now is the rain has stopped in the velodrome at Roubaix, which is where we're commentating to you from. And it looks to me as though this breakaway is going to split up here. We're looking at David Klinger. He's coming off the back of the peloton just now. He's done a lot of work at the front. He's now just trying to hang on to get off these cobblestones, and with a bit of luck he might hook up on the back again.
Well, very often what happens in the cobblestone sections, Phil, is they go absolutely ballistic. They blow out as many riders as possible, then they try and recover a little bit on the smooth surface. We're now back with the leading group of riders, and for them, they are getting themselves now psychologically prepared for what will come in around about 4 or 5 kilometers time, the big Forest of Arenberg. On the front here, this is Bodrogi, the Mapei rider. Just behind him, you can see the rider from Team Coach Schweber. But these guys right now, they're trying to get themselves ready for what is going to be the big explosion in this group, because the Forest of Arenberg, having been dry for so long, is going to be unbelievable when these guys come in there.
Well, Mapei looked to be very strong earlier on, and it was Robbie Hunter who was driving this breakaway. Then 2 punctures in fairly quick succession has taken him out of this leading group. Also his teammate Pedro Jarillo. So at the situation at the moment, as we are now on leaving sector 16, that was the sector of Pavé de Haveluy, heading now towards the Forest of Arenberg. So the riders inside 100 kilometers from the end, and a quick resume of the men we have in the breakaway. Enrico Cassani and Max van Heeswijk of Domo. Laszlo Bodroga, the only survivor of the Mapei team, is still there. Nico Matan of Cofidis, Tilly Gouvenou, Sebastian Talabarden, and Alexis Sivakov, all of Big Mat. Thomas Eriksson of CSC, Clear of the Telecom. Yannick Tombak is still here. Hoffman of CSC. Schweder of Team Coast. The Lotte rider is Hans de Klerk, and Tom Boonen of US Postal. They are the survivors of 31 riders that broke away after 31 kilometers. We are now inside 100 to go, and for anybody that knows the route around Roubaix, and Paul Sherwin certainly does, when you see the mines here, Paul, you know the forest isn't far away.
Well, that sign there indicating Paris-Roubaix. All of the bike riders around here know that the race is about to come in to the Forest of Arenberg. The Forest of Arenberg over the last few years has been a place where the race not has been won, but almost certainly for a lot of riders their chances have disappeared from winning Paris-Roubaix. They will be entering here in a few moments' time, and all will be very nervous.
So there we are, the breakaway. The next big challenge will be the Forest of Arenberg, and we'll be there to see that. Well, this group, Paul, is a little bit headless at the moment, really, apart from Big Matt must be thinking Christmas has arrived with 3 riders up here.
Big Matt did a very good move. They had 4 men in the original breakaway of 31 that got clear after 31 kilometers of racing. These guys now know they've got a very good chance of surviving for a long time, but they are trying to recuperate just a little bit before they go into the forest. The Big Matt team, led here by Thierry Gouvenou, have got 3 riders left in this leading group of 14. But I think the biggest operation has got to have come really from the Domo Farm Frites team, because they're the man we're looking at in the blue jersey at the back there, Max van Heesewijk. He's the kind of rider that you dare not give too much of an advantage to.
Well, setting the pace there is Tombak. He's the champion of Estonia. And these boys are working very hard to try and see the Forest well clear the peloton, which they should succeed in doing now. Just over 4 minutes is the gap. And Max van Heesewijk up here has worked very hard, because he's the big danger man, I think, for Domo. And Museo taking full profit by riding in the slipstream of the American team, knowing they must chase, because Van Heesewijk has to be remembered, could win this race given the right chances. Only about 4 days ago, when I was speaking to him at the before the Tour of Flanders and Ghent-Wevelgem, he was saying he has tremendous form this year, but he's had so much bad luck, either punctures or crashes. But at the moment, things are going his way.
Well, they're on to the Forest of Arenberg, the leading group, and that looks like Enrico Cassani, who's gone in there in first position at the moment. Domo Farm Frites riding a very sensible and clever race, Phil, because they have got 2 good riders in the leading group, and Johan Museo sitting at the back.
And on to the Forest of Arenberg now. It's Van Heesewijk setting the pace here. I think it might be Cassani.
Well, actually, it is Cassani. He's wearing number 2 on his back now, looking down on the rest of the group right now. They are just hoping to survive on this very difficult section of cobblestones. We are hearing, in fact, that the main field is absolutely charging down towards this leading group. There's Tom Boonen there in 4th position on the road. A great ride by him. Max van Heesewijk there is in 5th place for the moment. This group has not splintered as much as I thought it was going to.
Well, we're now into the Forest of Arenberg. They've just entered here, and it's Max van Heesewijk driving on at the front at the moment. The Belgian flags are waving. There's a huge crowd here, and it looks as though down in the centre of the course, with 94 kilometres to go, Paul, the rain has eased off.
That is actually
Enrico
Cassani,
yes,
who's gone into the Forest of Arenberg, but you can just see there's a little bit of slime come in from the amount of rain. It's actually not raining out on the course. Unfortunately, here at the Velodrome, it isn't raining right now either, but it has made the course very slippery indeed. When the main field comes in here, there's going to be absolute chaos, as there always is at the Forest of Arenberg. Cassani flicking across the road there, trying to get himself onto the smoother part at the side there. For him, fortunately, the organisation have put these steel barriers down, which has allowed the riders to come into the Forest of Arenberg in a fairly normal situation. In previous years, this race has been absolutely invaded here by the crowd. I think it's taken a certain amount of the atmosphere away for the spectators, but for the riders at least, and as a former rider, I have to go on that side, it has made it a much safer section of cobbles.
Well, that is absolutely true. You may notice the police outriders here all riding motocross bikes and not their normal road racing, road bikes rather, and for good reason too. Cassani, he's got great form just now. He had a wonderful Tour of Flanders as well, and he's pushing on here for Domo. And at the back of this breakaway now is the Big Matt boys, who are getting themselves just in a little bit of bother as we speak. That's big Thierry Gouvenou, I think, at the front now. No, it's Hans de Klerk at the front now for Lotto, just behind Cassani. Schweder is the rider in the yellow. This is a very interesting group.
Third place there is Tom Boonen. What a great revelation he's been to us over this last 3 weeks. He used to be a young man who was looked after by Dirk de Mol, the team manager of the US Postal Service and a former winner of Paris Roubaix. And look at him ride on these cobblestones here, Phil. You can see just how comfortable and confident that young man is. They were telling me this morning that after this race is finished, they're actually going to rest him for a month and try and bring him back onto form later on in the season. And it's good when you get a brilliant talent like that not to burn a rider out, especially when you don't forget that this young man is just 21 years of age.
Absolutely. He won 11 races in his last year as an amateur, and he was the under-23 champion of Belgium. I said to the team manager, Johan Bruley, this morning, you found a great one in Tom Boonen, Johan. He says, oh, we knew that 3 years ago.
Pretty confident. It's easy to say that once the man has got one or two very good performances under his belt, and I think he has been a great ally for George Hincapie over this last week of racing. Still in the Forest of Arenberg. This is a hugely long section of cobblestones, and it's still Enrico Cassani on the front there, just to the right-hand side behind the race organizer's car, setting a fairly good tempo, but Boonen using all of his experience riding down the middle of the cobblestones. The little piece of road at the side there can be very dangerous indeed, because every now and again, very occasionally, you can get a long line of cobblestones which can force the front wheel to just disappear. But this leading group now of 14 riders, splitting into 4 men who are moving off the front, it doesn't appear as if anyone has had any bad luck or any flat tires or mechanicals.
At the moment, 2.4 kilometers long of this cobble stretch. A little rise coming now as they come towards the end of it. And it's Cassani taking out over the top there, de Klerk, Boonen and Ralf Schweder. They are the 4 riders, just a slight advantage for them. Trying to close down the gap though, as the race now tries to reduce the lead of those 4. So often, although we're still a long way from the finish, this is where the foundations are built for the riders who take out the major prizes. These are the big map boys, placed in a little bit of trouble. That's Yannick Tombak in the blue jersey as champion of his country. And he is going to be joined at the back too, I think, by other riders now. You can see them being shaken as they try to pick what is a comparatively smooth ride over these cobbles. The Italian flag there, Paul, well, they've been the champions of the Classic so far this season, but there's very few of them near the sharp end of the race today yet.
Well, this has been a very long section of cobblestones, and very shortly at the far end of this section of cobblestones, Phil, we will have the main field charging in, and the main field is in the Forest of Arenberg right now. Somebody slipped right across the road, and once you lose your momentum here, Phil, it is devastation. There is Maximilian Chianri right in the middle of the group there. We can glance a little bit further back to see who else is present in this leading group. There's the champion of Belgium, Ludovic Capella. The champion of Holland has just gone down there, Jans Koorts as well. But it's absolute chaos here in the Forest of Arenberg, and we are not surprised.
We are not surprised at all. They are really struggling. This is a Rubens Bertogliati who's battling at the back. He was in the breakaway earlier of the original 31.
Fastest man from the main group into this cobblestone section now is Stefan Weissermann there on the right-hand side. Georgi Hincapie is there as well in second place, so he's got a good entrance into the Forest of Arenberg. Just trying to ride across behind. There's one of the Domo riders. I don't think it is Johan Museo, because Museo is a little bit further down the line right now. But Hincapie, as he was last year, very close to the front coming into the Forest of Arenberg. And the main field there stretching out behind. There's another mechanical incident for one of these guys in the main group.
This is decision time, the first big decision for the peloton. This is why US Postal rode so hard to bring George to the Forest in a great position to try and bridge gaps. Servais Canavan in the centre of the picture there. Fred Rodriguez off to the right, battling Fred. He's had 2 flat tyres today, and he's ridden hard already to get himself in what is an excellent position. This is an amazing bike race, and you'll never see anything else like it in the world of sport, and it looks as though the big guns are firing at the front of that peloton.
They all knew what they were waiting for. This is a very strategic piece of cobblestones. There's Freddie Rodriguez now leading the front end of that small split there. Carnarvon is in this group as well. But I think Georgi Hincapie is going to be very happy with his performance coming into the Forest of Arenberg. There's the Italian champion as well in the tricolor there, Daniele Nardello. He is also riding fairly close to the front right now. But Weissermann is the man setting the tempo. There's Taffy coming through. So all the big names for the moment, Phil, are in the main peloton.
Yes, but they'd like to see the gap come down a little bit. It's still 4 minutes, the last time check we've got. George Hincapie there, second wheel as they come through the forest. A lot of hard work having to be done. That looks very much like it is Johan Museo who's got himself right on the wheel of George Hincapie. Remember, bad memories for Museo in this direction of the forest. This is where he badly damaged his knee that almost ended his career. But they are memories, thank heavens now, and this man is still belies his mid-30s age bracket. As they leave the forest of Arenberg, there's some big hitters now, got themselves a lead over the main field.
It's amazing, because I have to say that did not look like Johan Museo at all. He pulled his sunglasses right down in front because he wanted to keep himself as much alert as possible. He's now come out of the forest of Arenberg with George Hincapie, so that really is, I think, going to set up a very serious chasing group right now.
Well, this is an amazing race. Everybody seems to be so committed so early on today. The field is disintegrating. The gap has come down slightly. They've got back about 20 seconds during the crossing of the forest. 3:40. There's Andrea Taffy. He too has been off the back with flat tyres today. He's off the back a little bit now in the split, and he's got some work ahead of him to get back up. Well, the race now swinging off the cobblestones of the forest of Arenberg. Now we return down towards Wallers, then we swing right and we continue on these cobblestones, which come thick and fast as we approach the finish, of course. But the Paris-Roubaix race very much on, but it still has an awful long way to go, this race, and George Hincapie now has started to fire well. So we're looking down, Paul, at the leading group here. As they try, this will be the chase group. What, 10 riders down there? Yeah.
They're going into the next section of cobblestones, and this is a very difficult section too, quite a long section. It's the cobblestones of Wallers, and they're around about 2.5 kilometers in length as well. This is a section of cobblestones that was used in years gone by at the Grand Prix of Denain, and they can be quite treacherous because they go through a lot of farm fields right now. They go through a small former railway bridge as well, which has been nicknamed in recent years the Pont Gibus, after the great Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, the man who won Paris-Roubaix on 2 occasions. These guys, as we look there at Laszlo Badrogi, starting to get themselves back into a sense of organisation right now, because they know, Phil, that the race has now started very much in earnest behind them. And the guys from Domo will know, as they enter these cobblestones, that Johan Museo has left the front end of the main field with Georgie Hincapie.
Yes, and Tom Boonen there now taking up his role of the ticket collector on the back of this breakaway of 10. But what a sensation he has been this past 10 days. First time that Paul and I have seen him in action, and he had a wonderful Tour de Flanders, a terrific Gent-Wevelgem, finally finishing in 7th place, and now he's right at the sharp end yet again here in his first Paris-Roubaix. Domo numerically have 2 men up here, and looking as though they're both extremely strong in Enrico Cassani and Max van Heeswijk. And Boone will just keep an eye on them and try not to work too hard now. The telecom rider who has bridged the gap is Andreas Kleyer. Nico Matan has made it. Hans de Klerk has also come across. The Team Coast rider, he's not in our picture just yet, but that's Ralph Schweder and Thomas Eriksson of CSC. 1 or 2 of the big mats have made the gap as well.
Well, Big Matt made the big operation, but this is the move that everybody looks for, Phil, at the first part of Paris-Roubaix. The team managers the night before, when they have their team meeting, mentioned to all of the riders, you have to look out for the early morning breakaway. But I don't think anybody could have imagined that the early morning breakaway today was going to contain 31 riders who built up an advantage of more than 4.5 minutes over the main field. We're now looking at Max van Heeswijk leading them over the forest, the cobblestones of Wallers, and they've still got a fair way to go before they come onto the good section of road.
Yes, and they won't see too much good section of road, so we get to the finish, which is still 2.5 hours away at least, as the peloton gap at 3:15 and closing in quite quickly. And Sean should know, because he won this race twice when the prize money shot up to something like $25,000 from 2,000 or 3,000. Sean was the man who took out Paris-Roubaix. We're looking now at the 10 men who have come together after the Forest of Arenberg. We're on sector 14 now, inside 88 kilometers to go.
This is the second group on the road here right now. This is a group which really is starting to contain some serious names. Stefan Weissermann there. I asked him this morning, Phil, if he was going to enjoy the dry conditions, because nobody could have imagined that it was going to rain like it has done over the last couple of hours. He says, it makes no difference to me, dry or wet, it's still Paris Roubaix. It's the race that I really feel I can win. But the man who wants to win is the man in first position right now there, Georgi Hincapie. He's in the place in Paris Roubaix where he wants to be. There coming up as well, Lars Mikkelsen for Team Coast, but Johan Museo has also made this very serious junction, and looking down the road there, Phil, they have opened up a serious advantage over what was the main field when they came into the forest of Arenberg.
Well, as you can see, they are now entering Sector 14 here. The leaders have gone through this. This isn't too severe. This is the one that goes through the Pont Gibus, but it is a nice chance for them to try and pick up the pace here. This incredible bike rider, Johan Museo, again has had to rejoin after a puncture. He did it well, 2 teammates waited for him. Now he knew he had to make his next decision in the forest. George knew that as well, and they've got some tough boys in this breakaway now, not least, as Paula said, Stefan Weissermann, a very tough man from the former East Germany, and he really is a tough bike rider, and I think this is exactly his sort of race.
It definitely is. If we remember last year, he had some serious problems with his cleat, and I asked him about that this morning. He said everything is being cleared up, everything is organized. I've got no problems today. I shouldn't have any mechanicals at all, and he obviously hasn't because he's in that chasing group on the road with the big names like Johan Museo and Georgi Hincapie. A lot of people are talking about this being the last year of Johan Museo, and I actually asked him the question this morning, and I said, well, are you going to race next year? And he said, basically, Johan Museo likes to keep a few surprises up his sleeve, so maybe we'll see him again next year.
Well, what does that mean? You never know with Johan. I think if he doesn't win today, he'll be back again for another dose next year, but we'll see. But this is the breakaway that is still clear, and Yannick Tombak is still in this breakaway. Enrico Cassani, Hans de Klerk, Ralf Schweder. 4 minutes to the peloton now, but the second group at 3:06, I think, is George Hincapie. We're looking at that now.
Johan Museo deciding to take up control at the front end of this group, and he looks a bit strange there with his glasses just on the front end of his nose there. What he's doing there is to stop as much of the dirt coming up into his eyes as possible, and just looking over the top of those sunglasses. This man is completely comfortable on these cobblestones. It's hard to believe that that was a corner on cobblestones he went round there, because he did not slow down at all. And the men who are the best at these cobblestones have to be on absolutely superb form today. You can see how close Stefan Weissermann is riding to the back wheel of Johan Museo, and I can tell you, having done this, it is a pretty dangerous thing to do, because you're absolutely relying on the man in front of you.
Yes, you are, and you've got to put 100% confidence that he's going to go the right way. Otherwise, you'll be in all sorts of trouble. We're looking now at the 12 leaders, which have regrouped after the crossing of the forest, and also Sector 14. We're about 84 kilometres from the finish, just over 50 miles still to race. An awful lot of room for change yet.
5 kilometres to the next section of cobblestones, and we look at the composition of that group in the front of the bike race. Cassani, Van Heeswijk, Bodrogi, Hans de Klerk, Nico Martin, Tombak, the champion of Estonia, Schweder, Eriksson, Hoffman. Tom Boonen, I have to say, absolutely superb for US Postal Service. Team Telecom have got their man there, Andreas Clear. And Thierry Gouvenou, finally the last survivor of the Big Mat team, who initially had 4 riders in that leading group.
You can see the clouds up there. The rain, thankfully, has stopped at the moment, as the breakaway here now consolidating. This is George Hincapie. This is the chase group, running it just over 3 minutes behind as we speak. And this is going to be a very difficult race. Anyway.
Well, this is the leading group of riders there out on the course. Tom Boonen for US Postal there, moving up into first position. But right now, Phil, it's going to start to get quite tactical, because a lot of these riders will be in communication with their team managers behind. They will know that the group containing George Hincapie and Johan Museo and Stefan Weissermann is starting to come through. So I would say those teams in the front will turn off the chase, because if these men do reintegrate, then it's going to completely change the face of the front end of this main field. In that group in the middle, it was very good to see Robbie Hunter was in a good group of riders. He will get picked up by Johan Museo, and that will be then a very strong working group moving forward. But once again, like last year, the team that was always dominant in Paris-Roubaix, Team Mappé, don't seem to be having lady luck on their side.
No, and they were the teams for the classics until they split up, and Domo went from Belgium with Patrick Lefevre. But look at this now. There's 2 minutes and a half is the gap now. There's still a lot of racing to be done here, and I think a lot of changes to be made before we get to the finish.
Well, as we look now at this leading group, they most certainly now, Phil, know that the race is starting to unfold behind them. A few extra tough cobblestone sections have been put into the latter part of this race. Paris Roubaix over the last couple of years certainly has tried to keep its nature, the fact that this race uses around about 50 kilometers or 31 miles of cobblestones, but it's more and more important for the organization to go out and look for new cobblestone sections, because as we get great progress in the transportation system around France, it really is amazing that the route in the north of France manages to conserve an awful lot of cobblestone sections, and in fact many of them are protected monuments today.
As we look at the main chase pack here, this is Thomas Eriksson in the breakaway, main leading pack rather, sorry, of the 12 men who've brought themselves back together. I'll quickly give you their names again. Enrico Cassani, Max van Heeswijk, Lazzilo Bedrogi, Nico Martin, Thierry Gouvenou, Sébastien Talabardon, Hans de Klerk, Raphael Schweder, Tristan Hoffmann, Yannick Tombach, Andreas Kleyer, and in fact the only US postal man here sitting right at the back at the minute is Tom Boonen. The other man I didn't mention, Thomas Eriksson of CSC. He's the white jersey, about 4 men along the bottom of the line. We're now on to zone 13 of the pavé here. Now we're waiting for the latest update on the chase being enacted by Stefan Wisserman, Lars Mikkelsen, George Hincapie and Johan Museeuw. They've come up on the remnants of this breakaway already, and I'm rather hoping that Robert Hunter, who's had such bad luck today, has got the legs to get onto that train and come forward again with them.
It's a very long section of cobblestones, this too, Phil, because it's actually split up into 2 sections. You ride along this part of the cobblestones here and you think that's the end. Well, when you get to the end of all this little zigzag section we're looking down upon here, then all of a sudden you turn to the right and there's another long stretch of cobblestones which is around about 1.5 kilometers in length, and this is what they look like. The important thing is to have the form on a day like this, because if you have good form and the legs are powerful, you absolutely glide over the surface of these cobblestones. As we look now at Laszlo Bodrogi, he will now be told the confirmation of exactly what's happening in the race behind. He'll know that his teammate Robbie Hunter has been picked out by Johan Museeuw and George Hincapie, but he will also know that Andrea Taffy, a former winner of this race, is somewhat behind and trying to keep himself in contact. Taffy, also one of the riders in the early part of the stage, Phil, having a few little difficulties with his mechanics.
Yes, Taffy actually looks as though he's done a complete Paris Roubaix at the moment, Paul, because he spent so much time battling in the cobblestones from the rear of the peloton with his flat tyre, and he's still a very determined bike rider, and he knows both sides of the Queen of the Classics because he's also won this event. So they're around about 50 miles now, almost exactly to the finish, as they are continuing now onto the sector of the pavé on zone 13. And this is the debut. We've done the debut through Honang and we're on to Wandigny, and it'll take us through to 80 kilometers on the finish as we make our way, and we're running exactly on schedule at the moment. If anything, we are slightly ahead of schedule because of the very fast start, and that is a good sign that the race is very much under pressure. It's taking a long time, I think, for the leaders, the men we expect to be at the front of the race very shortly, to try and put matters to rights, purely because they allowed 31 men to escape in the first 30 kilometers of racing, and that was when the sun was shining.
It was when the sun was shining. It's all changed right now. It's very cold here in the north of France, just tickling above freezing level at the moment. The rain is sort of inconsistent right now, but it's just enough, Phil, to make the cobblestones very dangerous and slippery. You can see just a small coating of moisture over the surface of those cobblestones there. As we can see on the front, the Domo Farm Frites there rider is Max van Heeswijk. About 5 or 6 places back there is his teammate Enrico Cassani, and just sitting on the back there for US Postal Service is Tom Boonen. Boonen has done an absolutely magic ride, and I don't think he could have had a better week in the one-day classics for the start of his professional career.
Well, 2:16 now, and that's the Hincapie group, and they're coming in as fast as they can, but not too quick to try and pick up the leaders. We've no further news at the moment on the peloton. Remember, we are actually situated in the velodrome at the finish, where I have to tell you now, the rain has just started again here. So I thought it was going to clear up, but it hasn't been the case, as the riders now are making their way towards Sector 12, which will take us into the last 75 kilometres. This is the composition of the chase group now. Harillo and Hunter were in the lead group, as well as Serpellini. They're now back in a very select chase group here, containing George Hincapie, Denis Zanetta. He was originally in the breakaway. He's gone back as well. And Stefan, and there's a little bit of a wheel slip there. And that looks to me as though it was Andrea Taffy on the front who lost his back wheel. But what a bike ride. I think he held it up.
That was pretty tricky doing that, but you know, these guys, when they're in good form, they are absolute acrobats on the bike. You're alert every time you come into the cobblestone sections and you're waiting for something like that. But this is turning out to be pretty dramatic. A very good move by Hincapie. He followed the acceleration of Stefan Wesemann through the forest of Arenberg, and we're now looking at a nucleus of the big names of this bike race. One man missing at the moment, Peter van Petegem from the Lotto squad, but this would be fantastic to see Hincapie ride across the gap right now. It's a fairly large group because they've picked up one or two riders who are in the early morning breakaway, but Hincapie is riding like a man possessed. He actually wants to put a stranglehold on this bike race, but he needs to be very careful of the performance of Johan Museeuw, because Museeuw is an older rider and he really has got a great tactical sense, and he'll use Hincapie to the very last moment.
But the one thing that, Paul, that might be in George's favour now is he's got rid of all the teammates, basically, of Museeuw, and that we might see a more one-on-one race today than sort of 3 versus George.
Well, that's what it was like in the past. It was very difficult for George when he had to come up against the full block of the Domo Farm Frites team. This looks now like the shape of Maximilian Chiandri, who he said this morning that he wanted to ride well, and maybe today was going to be the day. He said, I don't want to say like I do every year the same old thing, but I really hope that one day I'm going to have the luck in Paris Roubaix, because it certainly is a race I'd like to win. And there, just tucked in behind him, is the man that we really didn't think would see the start line today, Servais Knaven. He in fact had a very interesting accident out on the course as he was training last week, and he actually had a collision with a school kid on a bike. He was taken to hospital. He had x-rays, and they decided to allow him to ride. The team said he could ride today, Phil, because the weather conditions were great.
Well, hats off to Servais, because he's still in the race, and weather conditions are far from great right now. We caught a glimpse there of Nico Matan. This is the leading group in the Paris-Roubaix, the 100th edition of this race. Matan trying to get clear at the minute, taking with him what looks like Thierry Gouvenou. Just ahead of the original, or the remnants now of the breakaway. 12 of them still left together as they drive on towards the finish in Roubaix. But it's still a long way to go yet, and they know it.
Hans de Klerk is the man who's joined onto the back wheel here of Nico Matin. And these conditions, I don't think anybody could have imagined it was going to be like this morning, Phil, because from the 3 days of Le Panne through the Tour of Flanders and Ghent-Wevelgem, the skies have been blue here in the north of France, and right now they're a very terrible grey with a consistent small amount of rain coming down. It's not enough to wash the cobblestones of the mud, which makes them very slippery. It's just enough to put a small coating of moisture over the surface, which is why these guys are slipping all over the road right now.
And gently does it, even on the smooth roads. Matan bringing round Hans de Klerk. Two riders with Belgium very close to their hearts, and these are their types of road here as they race towards the borders with Belgium. And this is the chase group, some 8 riders it looks like, Paul, are tagging on. And just the 2, and then there's one in between there, and then 2, 4, 6 riders are chasing there. So the breakaway again has split up a little bit here. Ralph Schueder is there. Best place for him was a 2nd place in a World Cup Classic.
This is the 2nd group on the road right now. That's Lars Mikkelsen on the front in the yellow jersey. Following him, Johan Museeuw, then Georgi Hincapie. Stefan Wesemann is there as well. And this is the kind of speed that the big names push themselves to over the cobblestones. They are hitting these cobblestone sections right now at speeds approaching 50 kilometers an hour. And it really now is becoming a war of attrition on these cobblestones. It's a wearing down process, trying to knock the living daylights out of your adversaries as we go on to the very tough sections, recuperate a little bit on the smooth roads, and then go for it once again.
Well, this also a little bit wet here. The rain just hanging off at the minute, but I don't think it's going to stay that way now. There's every sign it's going to continue again as the riders make their way towards the finish. Heading on to sector 12 here now. They're the leaders steadily regrouping as they are driven on. This is in fact the chase group we're looking at now. This certainly is turning out to be one of the world-class bike races. Paris-Roubaix today, one we'll all remember, the 100th running. These two riders getting away on the cobbles. Nico Matan here always promises to do something great, and he's being trailed at the minute by Hans de Klerk of Lotto.
It reminds me, Phil, how important it is when you're a bike rider to be prepared for absolutely everything. Most of the guys this morning will have come to the start with fairly short sleeves and ready for a nice sunny ride in the Paris-Roubaix, the 100th edition of this bike race. But all of them will have had with them a special bag that they leave in the team manager's car, which would have in it clothing for the Arctic conditions that they're now being subjected to. And many of them out on the course today have had the ability to put on extra coats, extra arm warmers, and obviously, as we caught a glimpse there of Nico Matan, a very warm hat over his head to keep as much of this cold out as possible.
Well, Nico finished well in this race last year, 13th in fact, unlucky for some, but he's a battler and he knows this course and enjoys the Paris-Roubaix a lot. Got himself 5 good wins last year, including the prologue of the Paris-Nice, so he's a well-experienced bike rider with Hans de Klerk in this breakaway. And the rain has started to come down very, very heavily now. And I'm sorry to have to tell you that your commentators are working in the open air today, so all our facts and figures are in our heads rather than written down.
Well, they're pretty good heads as well, Phil, because this kind of racing and these kind of circumstances are ones that we always remember. These are the dramatic races of the start of the year. Those are the two leaders up there, Matan and Hans de Klerk. A small group coming behind, but last time we looked back at the chase group of Hincapie and Museo, they didn't seem to be very much more than just a couple of minutes behind this leading group of riders. Quite shortly, they'll be coming up to another set of cobblestones, and that will be the section of cobblestones at Tilloy-les-Marchiens. And then they will have a long section of flat, smooth road to recuperate. But what's happening at the moment is that a big chase coming back with Museo and George Hincapie.
Janus Tombak, these are the two leaders. Sorry, this is Nico Matan. And there we are, Paul. There are 12 zones remaining. A total 20.8 kilometres, just a shade under 50 kilometres in total of pavé of the 261 kilometres of Paris-Roubaix. And these two boys decided to strike out rather early, I feel, but you take your chance when he presents itself in Paris-Roubaix.
The important thing in Paris-Roubaix is to try and see just what the opposition is like on the cobblestone sections. And if these guys are strong in the group with you, then if you do leave them behind on the cobbles, then they can ride back up on the smoother tarmac and then try and form a smaller group at the front. This group started the day off at 31 riders in strength, and it's now literally exploded since we came in to the big forest of Arenberg. But I think the most important news so far is the fact that George Hincapie and Johan Museo and Stefan Weissermann are chasing behind. This is the section of cobblestones at Tilloy-les-Marchiens, and it's called Warlang. It's 2.4 kilometers in length. It's a 4-star section of cobblestones, and you can see the experience of those Belgians picking their way across there as we go a little further back down the race to see just what the situation is like. And this is at the back of the race. Andrea Taffy seems to be having quite a tough time. He's there with his teammate Daniele Nardello. And so it seems as if in the early part of this race, once again, it doesn't look as if Lady Luck has smiled upon the shoulders of Andrea Taffy.
No, and he's got Gabriella Balducci is the rider just in our camera lens here, nearest camera. And there's a little bit of work to be done now for Daniela Nardello. Domo have got a few riders here as well. Number 5 there is Marco Milesi, and number 3 is Wilfred Kretskins, who was a very good, strong rider the other day and has had a very good week. So he's a strong man to help them possibly regroup. But you never know when Lady Luck is going to turn against you. Javinia Spruck was number 27 there. The Rabobank riders here working very hard. Eric Zabel also in this breakaway. So this is the group now trying to get back on terms and reach up with George Hincapie, I feel. And there's the two leaders now. Hans de Klerk, Nico Matan. looking very solid on the front for the moment at least. So we're looking now at the two riders in the lead here, and this is Hans de Klerk and Nico Matan. We have gone on to the first of two sectors of cobbles at Pavé sector 12A, and they haven't got a big lead over the group, but in fact the group trying to bring them back. Andrea Taffy's got himself into a chase group to try and reach up with George Hincapie, and Eric Zabel is with Taffy, but they're leaving themselves an awful lot of work to do now to bridge the gap. This race is still spread out across the cobblestones over about 5 minutes. It's going to be a tough one to know exactly when you are at the front today as we continue towards the blue skies. Well, you can see by the dirt on the camera lens here, the old cobbles are throwing up the mud at us. These are the two leaders. And Nico Matan, they're sharing the pace here very well. They're not panicking at this stage. They've got the gap, but of course they know only too well it is still a long way to the finish. Something like 71 kilometres still to ride, Paul.
Hard to believe that these weather conditions have changed so much, but it is going to turn out to be a pretty dramatic Paris Roubaix. Those two leaders don't have much of an advantage over what remains of the group there, and it looks in fact as if the young Belgian rider from US Postal has disappeared from that group. He was riding so well, Tom Boonen. Well, there he is. Oh, it's good to see him. He was just caught in the shadow there, right on the tail there of Tristan Hoffmann.
Yes, well, we're looking now at the chase group. They're giving them at 10 seconds on the two front runners, and the third group will be that of George Hincapie and of course Johan Museu at 2 minutes and 1 second. They're coming back to the leaders, but they're doing it very slowly, and I think that's the way to do it right now. No point in committing suicide to reach them too soon. And it looks as though Nico Matan's having a job hanging on to Hans de Klerk here on this sector of cobbles as well.
Hans de Klerk looking very comfortable, but you go through different patches on a race like this. Let's not forget it's 264 kilometers of racing, but this is the intense part of the racing. Once we get into the cobblestone sections here, it is so repetitive. The form is up and down all of the time. You really have to try and make sure that you control yourself and save just a little bit till the end. Now then, we're looking at the serious chase group, I would have to call this one. This is the group here with Hincapie, Museu, Lars Mikkelsen is in there. These two riders here were in the leading group a little bit earlier on in the day. It looks like Thierry Maréchal is in there with Art Vierhouten, but I haven't seen anything so far, Phil, of Peter van Petegem.
Well, they've still got a long way to go, but I think they will join the front runners very shortly. Well, Bernard Hinault once rode this race, won it, and then told the organisers he'd never take part in it again. But happy 100th to everybody, and that's the way we all feel. We're still on the Sector 12 second section now as we head towards the finish. Some 70 kilometres still to ride. They're trying to regroup at the front, but the pace is still being set by Hans de Klerk and Nico Matan. Tom Boonen, the US Postal sensation, is in that group.
This is the second group right now. This looks like Johan Museu on the front. He really wants to put the hammer down. He wants to get Paris-Roubaix on in earnest. He wants to get himself into a position where he can possibly win this bike race again. But now taking over the pacemaking on this very long section of cobblestones at Weil-Lang. It's 2.4 kilometers long. That's 1.8 miles. Hincapie has come to the front and he is setting an unbelievable tempo. He doesn't have very many teammates left now. They've all been left behind. They did a lot of work for George Hincapie. They literally blew the race apart, and Hincapie now is putting a man like Johan Museu into difficulty.
Well, it's becoming something of a balancing act here on the cobblestones. Museu, the master of the cobbles, looks the least troubled. George is riding very solidly as well. There we are, just inside 70 kilometres now to the finish. And these riders know they're riding behind the two race favourites here, George Hincapie and Johan Museu. So why not let them do all of the work? That seems to be the attitude here on Sector 12 of the Pavé. George is doing a lot of work, but I think George is happier when he is doing a lot of work in Paris-Roubaix. He's shown us that over the years with his 6th place and his 2 4th places. He likes to dictate, and this is one of those unusual races, Paul, where I think you have to be proving to yourself all of the time you're strong, and of course being first man, you're getting first shot at the cobbles as well.
The strange thing about riding the cobblestone sections, we just ride off section number 12 to go here, is that it hurts everybody just exactly the same way, and Georgie Hincapie is dictating his pace to the other riders in the group. And yes, it does give you an awful lot of confidence to know that you're putting other people into difficulty. But it is also, I think, what has happened so far in the race is George Hincapie has made a very good operation. He's isolated Johan Museo, so it's going to be at the end of the day Museo against Hincapie, but don't count out Stefan Weissermann. The big thing that US Postal have done was they used their team to perfection, making sure that that leading group of 31 didn't get too far off the front, but they did have a man in the group, the man that they expected to ride well, the man who in the Belgian papers this week said, I am going to be the sergeant for George Hincapie this weekend in Paris Roubaix. Well, I think he's had a bit of promotion there because he's probably moved up to Lieutenant Colonel.
I think, you know, we're going to see a lot from that boy over the years, and he's learning it with a great team too, because they're having a wonderful start to the year, US Postal. 5th place by Floyd Landis in the Circuit of the Sarthe in France, just 48 hours before this race began. The gap now, as you saw, 2 minutes and 3 seconds, so it's being held just now by this counter-attack by Hans de Klerk and Nico Matin. De Klerk is a good man on rough roads, because last year he won one of the Belgian semi-classics, Kuurne Brussels Kuurne, and that also has cobble stretches of roads in it. There's Robbie Hunter sat at the back. He knows all about the bad luck today. 2 flat tyres took him out the front and put him in this group here.
Freddie Rodriguez has got into this group as well. I'm not sure where Freddie Rodriguez came from, but he has managed to integrate the group, and I'm trying to look a little bit further forward to see if this is still the group containing Hincapie and Johan Museo, and it must be, because right on the front there's a US Postal jersey. So Johan Museo has got a very serious teammate who's come up alongside him right now, the man who at the start of this day was 3rd overall in the World Cup, the American champion Freddie Rodriguez, and he too, Phil, has had a brilliant start to the season, the best he's ever had.
No doubt about that. 2nd in Milan San Remo. That gave him all of the confidence he required to have a very good Tour de Flanders, finishing in the chase group. And look at this trouble for Hans de Klerk now as he's on this sector of cobblestones. Matin is pushing on a little bit, and he's well gonna, and oh, I thought that was another cyclist coming in the shop, but it was off camera. There's the shot. Just look at this now, Paul. This has gone from what was just dust covered just 24 hours ago to a little bit of a quagmire now.
Absolutely brilliant. These are the Paris-Roubaix that certain riders absolutely dream about. I remember Steve Bauer always wanted the weather like this. Little bit of picture breakup, but that's because of the microwave link up there. De Klerk lost his momentum there, Phil, and once you lose your momentum, it is so difficult to get going again.
Well, he's being urged on by the crowd, who are wisely staying the other side of that barrier. He is no longer a happy man. I'm wondering if, in fact, he's got a softening tyre here, and he's in all sorts of bother now. And it's a good job we don't have sound out on the course, I think, just now. But Hans de Klerk, I thought perhaps he had a softening tyre, but he seems to be okay again now. He's found his place. Usually the cobbles are best to ride dead centre. That's when the highest above the ground and usually the least damaged by the traffic. As we look down on the 2 leaders, and in fact, de Klerk is going to ride back up onto the wheel of Nico Matin. It would be foolish of Nico to even try to stay away just now. He'll need a lot of help if he's going to hold them all off to Roubaix.
We still have an awful long way to go to the finishing line right now, but I would say that you're right. Nico Matin has waited for de Klerk to come forward because he needs the assistance of somebody else with still almost 60 Ks to go to the finish line.
That's right, slightly more in fact, and the rain is very, very heavy at the finishing line at the moment, and we are getting quite wet ourselves as these 2 riders have got themselves back together, and oh, and down they go as we speak, and Fred Rodriguez is piled up as well.
Well, this is the chaos of Paris-Roubaix. It looks as if Stefan Weissermann has got his bike caught in the front wheel of somebody else there. One of the riders from Lotto at the back here. Robbie Hunter was down as well. And I remember this section of cobblestones, Phil. It just needs a small amount of rain. This was dry before we came here just a few days ago. Hunter, you see, is having a hard time getting himself up and running again. These cobblestones are so slippery, you can hardly get yourself going once you stop. And for Robbie Hunter, you see, he gets no traction at all. Let's have a look at that one more time. Coming round there, the Lotto rider went down. Freddie tried to correct it. He couldn't do that at all. Weissermann is off the road into the potatoes as coming through on the far-hand side there. You can see Robbie Hunter is down, but certainly not out.
Poor old Steph has got his handlebar stuck in the front wheel there, and he's having to sort that out. Robbie Hunter, 2 punctures in the fall that we know of right now. And meanwhile, the policeman himself has also dropped it here. Well, our sympathies are with him because it's nothing to do with riding skills at all. This is a very treacherous stretch of cobblestones. Thierry Marichal is the Lotto rider there.
Well, you really have to be alert, Phil, coming back to this kind of sections of cobblestones. That looks like Lars Mikkelsen trying to get himself back in contention. That is Johan Museo, who's taken advantage of that slippery section of cobblestones there to get the tempo back up again. Hincapie's not letting anything get away from him right now. He knows the man to watch is Johan Museo, the Lion of Flanders, and he probably has got one or two surprises up his sleeves for us.
Well, these are the cobblestones at their worst today. At the worst because the rain hasn't been here for at least 2 or 3 weeks, and now it's fallen today and it's made them very slippery indeed. This is Johan Museo now, piling the pressure on at the front. He's seen his chance and he's taking it, and you can't blame him for that. We are now back with the leaders, Paul, and these are the two leaders, probably unaware about that big crash behind.
Well, they're now on a very long, smooth section of road where they'll try and recuperate a little bit before they go in again to a whole host of cobblestone sections. The two leaders that we're looking at, Nico Martin in the white and blue jersey of Cofidis there with Hans de Klerk from Lotto, are around about 20 seconds ahead of a group of 6 riders as we rejoin now Johan Museo's group. He's looking over his shoulder to see what sort of damage. He's shouting to the other riders to work as hard as possible right now. Mikkelsen is in the group, Hincapie is in the group, and if we can have another quick look, we will probably see that Servais Knaven, and there he is, wearing number 1 as last year's winner, is in this break. This is absolutely remarkable as Hincapie is in with the same men he was in the leading group with last year.
Yes, well, earlier I was saying that things were going the way of George Hincapie, but look at that lineup now. Museo getting the man who won last year, Servais Knaven, in with him. Knaven is a big surprise to us all. It was reported over the weekend he was out after his bizarre accident when he hit a child in an underpass while out training. Seemed to be too injured. Out came the sun and out came Knaven, and here he is now in a chase group with Museo, Hincapie and Lars Mikkelsen, who told me against Wevelgem he has tremendous form this year and he's never been outside the top 20.
Tactically, things are starting to look rather bad for George Hincapie because there are 2 more Domo riders up the road. Let's not forget they were in that early morning breakaway, Max van Heesewijk and Enrico Cassani. So when all of these groups come back together, there are going to be 4 riders from Domo Farm Frites. There will be 2 riders from US Postal Service, George Hincapie and Tom Boonen. So now it looks as if the team of the classics, Domo Farm Frites, have had the tactical advantage tip across to their side once again.
And the rider just picked up there is coming back from the breakaway. I think it was possibly Talabardon who has just been caught from the front group and has come back into the back. No, it's number 93. So that's a CSC rider who slipped away outside of our view. So he's come into this group now, and I don't quite know where he popped up from, but it's like that in Paris Roubaix. This is Tristan Hoffmann, original member of the breakaway. And just look at these boys now cutting a steady trail through. We're picking up all of the riders who've had their share of falls as well today. This is Hans de Klerk now back here. So he really didn't enjoy his last couple of stretches of cobblestones, Paul.
He certainly didn't, but you know, this race is now starting to come back together because this group now that we're looking at here with Hincapie, Museo and Knaven are not very much more than 1.5 minutes behind the leading 2 on the road, Nico Martin and Hans de Klerk.
Well, they'll be thankful for a little bit of smooth road for the moment now as we cross over towards sector 11, which will take us through the track of the prayers, the Chemin des Prières. This is Max van Heesewijk, second. Tom Boonen wants a little bit of a drink, and I can't blame him. This is the reforming of the breakaway at the front. Hans de Klerk is back. I must assume, too, that Nico Martin is back, and they're reforming the breakaway. It's been a good break, though, and it's now down to just 7 riders.
7 riders who remain from a leading group of 31 men who escaped after 31 kilometers of this bike race. And it really is going to be a treacherous run in towards the finish because once again, Phil, the rain has come down here in the Velodrome in Roubaix. It's a kind of race today when you certainly need to win on your own if you want to win this bike race, because sprinting round this track here is going to be very dangerous for anybody because there's no way at all you can go up the slopes coming down towards this finishing straight.
We're heading into Beuvray-la-Forêt, via Sarze-Rosière, and that's going to take us into the last 65 kilometres now. 7 riders still looking extremely strong. This is Cassani. Van Heeswijk is his teammate. De Klerk, Matan, Schweder. The remnant of the 31, as Paul has said, and still looking good to me, all of them, Paul.
Well, they have been in an ideal situation because for them, this race has been run off at a steady tempo. They haven't had to suffer the accelerations and decelerations that have been suffered by the rest of the group further back, while they've sped up to try and get themselves into an ideal situation for each individual section of cobblestones. But what has happened for these guys is they've ridden everyone at a nice tempo, and they will be a little fresher than the guys coming up from behind. But let's not forget, the big names are starting to come up from behind right now. Hincapie and Museo are not too much more than 1.5 minutes in arrears as we come into the town of Orchy, which is 61 kilometers to go to the finishing line, and still 11 more sections of cobblestones. The next section of cobblestones, by the way, is called the Chemin des Prières, which is the road of prayers, and I think 1 or 2 guys will be praying for the sun to come out, as it seems to have done here at Orchy. But here in Roubaix on the finish line, the heavens have opened.
Yes, it has. At least they're in the dry, which is more important, I suspect. Into Berry-la-Forêt, which is the second feed of the day. Time to reassess the situation now, take on food, ready for the final battle and the last 65 kilometers. This is Hans de Klerk. He's made one move. Can he make another one? Fred Rodriguez, now hardly recognizable, covered in the mud of Roubaix. He's bounced his way towards Roubaix today so far, because he's also had 2 punctures that we know of. So he's had 2 punctures and a fall. Meanwhile, back at the team car here of the Cofidis boys, as they try now to just settle down, having all taken on their food at the feeding station, and they're packing in now for the last 65 kilometers of cycling.
They've just had around about a 10-kilometer stretch of good road, which is why many of them now are just slowing back and looking back to the team cars to make sure they're getting themselves loaded up with food and drink for the next time, because once they go into the Chemin de Prières, they've got a lot of cobblestone sections very close together. This is a time for everybody to get a rough idea and try and understand what is going on in the bike race, because despite all the communications that these teams have nowadays, Paris Roubaix is a very complicated and difficult bike race to understand. You're never really quite sure who's at the front and who's at the back of the race. You see the mechanic here. This is another big problem when you get a wet Paris Roubaix. The mechanic there just putting a little more oil onto the cluster and the chain there, because it gets full of grit, it gets full of mud, and it tends to make an awful grinding noise, which really does tend to work out on your brain just a little bit. Matan now has decided enough is enough. Let's get this race organized. There you can see is Enrico Cassani. This is Bodrogi coming forward. He's every one of these bike riders, I think, has been on the ground so far.
Let's look at the state. The washing is a priority at the end of any Paris-Roubaix, I think, and I'm never sure whether the equipment's worth washing because it's so badly damaged by the time you get down there. It's a mechanic and the washer-up's nightmare. Well, the breakaway, de Klerk, Cassani, Matan, Schweder, Hoffman, Tom Boonen and Max van Heeswijk. Just a little bit of a recuperation sector here before they go into the final showdown. We're heading across to the Chemin des Prières, which is sector number 11. And the George Hincapie group, Paul, I believe, is closing in pretty quickly now.
Down to 55 seconds, so in the next section of cobblestones or so, we should see George Hincapie, Museo and Carnarvon at the front of this bike race. You can see there that the US Postal team car is up alongside Boonen. They've obviously told him to cut down and to make sure that they don't do too much work, because the race is about to change and we're about to see a whole lot of new faces at the front.
And so this is another selected group. This is group number 2, and there is Johan, driving on nicely as well as he may, because he reads a bike race so well. And the leader here, Team Coast, Lars Mikkelsen, Max Chandry. This is a very, very strong group. Now, Max, we'd love him to do a ride. He is such a good bike rider. He's the only British rider left in, I think. Jeremy Hunt started, but he said he would not make the distance. He's not been feeling at all well. There's Freddy Rodriguez as well, and he is covered with all the mud of the last sector of cobblestones. Max has got himself into a good move here and prepared to work. And so too is Lars Mikkelsen, as the gap is down to 50 seconds.
Good to see Chiandri in that group, and it's good to see that out on the course, Phil, that the sun has come out just for a little while to give the riders some decent morale, but it is very, very wet here at the finish line at the moment. This is the second group on the road, and the time gap is coming down all of the time. It's now down to just 50 seconds, but I think everybody now just trying to take an assessment of how the race has developed. We would like to be able to go back a little bit further just to see the position of some of the big names like Van Petegem and Andrea Taffy. Taffy having bad luck in the early sections of cobblestones. His bike has been slipping and sliding all over the place. And I must say, I was very interested to note how careful Johan Museo was at the start of this morning, Phil, because he was actually making sure that he checked all of his tyre pressures. He had obviously received the phone call from up in Belgium to say that the weather, the bad weather, was coming down from the north, and he let out a couple of bars out of those tyres. Now, these guys, on a day like this, when they know the weather is going to be bad, they will have the tyres very soft indeed. They will run them at about 5.5 to 6 atmospheres, which is certainly almost the point where you can bounce them on the rim. But if you are riding well over the cobblestones, like a man like Museo does, that's not really that much of a problem.
Latest gap slipped slightly to 59 seconds there on the leading group of Hans de Klerk, Cassani, Matan, Schweder, Hoffman, Boonen and Van Heeswijk.
Hello, I'm Joe Plankard. You're watching World Cycling Productions.
Here now on the town of Orchy, and this is where we head to the next sector of cobblestones, and it's going to be a very difficult sector, this one. It used to be one of the most feared sections, and they're still raining at Roubaix, and they zigzag around the countryside. They're not that very far from Roubaix right now, and so I think they can be expecting the rain very shortly as well.
Well, the reason for that is because so many of the cobblestone sections are starting to disappear from the north of France. But some of the big cobblestone sections, like the Forest of Arenberg, have been preserved forever because they've put preservation orders on them. So that will, as long as we can see, stay as part of this Paris Roubaix bike race. This is the leading group right now. Nico Matin coming through the streets of Orchy, and once they leave, they've got about maybe 2 kilometers to the next section of cobblestones. But they now are almost certainly waiting for the group of Museo and the big names to come forward. They know that the race has exploded behind, and they know right now that the big guns are about to join them.
I think you're possibly right there, Paul. There's 7 riders in this breakaway. Possibly 8 riders have now got up here. I think another man has just bridged the gap, which is always good to see. And there are 7 riders chasing. This is a close-up of Tom Boonen, the sensation of US Postal, Belgium's under-23 national champion, first-year professional. I have to say he is riding like he's ridden as a pro all of his life. He's had 3 superb races this week with the Tour of Flanders, Ghent-Wevelgem, and again in Paris-Roubaix. He doesn't know the word to sit at the back and rest.
He doesn't. He really has ridden like a very experienced bike rider. But what's happening now is the fact is all of these guys are just sitting on the tail of the man at the front there. That was Nico Matin, because they all have a serious intention of men in the back group. Museo's got 2 teammates in the front there. Lars Mikkelsen has got a teammate in the front. George Hincapie has got a teammate in the front. So not too many riders in that leading group of 8 now, Phil, really want to contribute too hard to the work. They want their leaders to come forward, and they'll reassess the situation and the game plan.
Yes, and look at Servais Knaven looking very, very determined now. And again, Domo could suddenly have 4 riders in this breakaway once these 2 contact, and putting them in an enormously strong position. Johan Museo looking simply superb as he rides on here, drives on and closes down to within that 50 seconds of the 7 leaders. Well, it doesn't look too different today either, because the riders are just as muddy as we look down now at sector number 11 here to await the arrival of the leaders, which have now swelled to 8. And a huge crowd here as we skirt the edge of Orchy and into this very narrow section, the track leading to the prayers. And there are the leaders now. It looks as though it looks to me as though it's possibly Van Heeswijk who's got himself onto the front. Tom Boonen, not a wise position to sit there at the back now, because if the riders do slip and slide, Boonen will be taken out with them. The rider in the yellow strip there is Team Coast Ralf Schweder. Had a great day out today as Ralf. And there's the flag of the USA, and George Hincapie is on his way.
Hincapie's not too far behind right now. The last time check we had was just 40 seconds, and this is a very long section of cobblestones, the Chemin des Prières. Max van Heesewijk is at the front there. There is Hans de Klerk. Next man coming through is the man from Cofidis, Matin, and sitting right on the back there is Boonen. But this is a very slippery, tricky section of cobblestones. You can see every now and again, if you just glimpse across to the side of the pictures, there are team cars who come out, and these are fairly unofficial team cars who are out there to try and look after their riders should they have a flat tire at a critical part of the course, because if you were to have a flat tire right now, you may well have to wait for a couple of minutes before your team car can get in to look after you.
Absolutely, and so they just pop in. It's not against the rules, by the way, so they send extra help out on sectors where they expect trouble. Well, the man that came across, and we didn't see him come across, is Laszlo Bedrogi for Mapei, so it makes 8 riders in the lead now as the pressure goes on, and 7 riders are chasing. Canavan, Museo, Rodriguez, Chandri, and Hincapie rather is there as well.
This is the second group on the road there now being led by Maximilian Chandri. A quick time check back to Andrea Taffy. He's 1 minute and 45 seconds behind at the moment, as we now join the group with Chandri, Hincapie, Museo and Canavan, the big names that we expected to see here. They've been given an official time check of 53 seconds, but I figure myself, Phil, it's actually inside of that time right now. There you can see the group, Hincapie there comfortably in 3rd place. And once again, the spectators here in the north of France coming out to celebrate this 100th anniversary of Paris Roubaix, which really is very dear to the hearts of the people from the north, les nordistes.
Absolutely. These are the spectators who really know their cycling sport, and these riders are heroes to them, and well, they are to everybody that appreciates how hard it is out there today. 8 of them are leading at the minute, 7 of them are chasing. It looks to me as though Bedrogi, who's just got back on, is having a little bit of trouble hanging on in the Chemin des Prières. This is 58 kilometers from the finish now, and there's our traditional view from the horses as we watch the riders come over the prairies.
Very cold here down in the finishing line, but it's very hot, the racing out there, and once again Hans de Klerk is trying to open up an advantage over the rest, chased smartly there by Hans de Klerk, as Bedrogi really seems to be suffering on this very long, difficult cobblestone section as they come away now from the Chemin des Prières. Tom Boonen sitting at the back here, allowing everybody else in this group to set the pacemaking at the front. Matin is in front position there, followed by Cassani. So just off the front will be de Klerk and Max van Heesewijk. Max van Heesewijk, by the way, Phil, was in the leading group last year. He'd obviously been given the order again this morning to make sure that there were a lot of Domo Farm Freaks riders in that leading group that nearly always goes habitually in the first hour of racing at Paris Roubaix.
Well, Max has chased and hooked up to Hans de Klerk as they come off sector number 11. Just a short sector of smooth road now, and we're 57 kilometers from the finish. And Van Heesewijk is a real danger today. If he doesn't have any bad luck, he will be my man to win the race, and let's hope it goes good for him. And that's the remnants of the 8, 4 or 5 of them there. So it looks as though Bedrogi's struggling again at the back, but he should rejoin, because our next sector comes in about 4 kilometers time, which is the pavé at Auchy and onto the pavé of Bercy.
Quick glimpse there just at the side of the road. You might have seen that US Postal jersey. That was one of their mechanics waiting after the end of the section of cobblestones. All of the riders will know that it will be communicated to them over the radios just exactly where the mechanic is in the section of cobblestone. So if they do have a problem, then they've got the ability just to ride on the rim for an extra 100 or 150 meters to get to the position where the mechanic is with the spare wheel. There is Nico Matin. He will be very happy to be in this leading group. And a quick glimpse there of the man who, for me, has been a superb revelation for the US Postal Service in these one-day classics, and, of course, the 3 days of Le Panneau which preceded them. Tom Boonen, I think, will be a man that US Postal will be able to count on for many years to come.
Well, he certainly earned his rest, which will come after this race, because the young man of 21 gets a break, and I don't blame them for resting him, because he's had a wonderful 10 or 15 days of racing. There he is, sitting at the back doing his job, hoping he will shortly breathe a sigh of relief with the arrival of George Hincapie. The gap is still closing down. Here's the composition of this breakaway. And the man missing from it just now is Bedrogi again. He's been left on the cobbles, but he should get back with a bit of luck. He's a very, very good time trialist, the Hungarian, as we all know, and so maybe he'll come back. Back to group number 2 on the road, and marshalling affairs at the front. The 2 Domo riders. To the right is Servais Canavan, to the left the ex-world champion and twice a winner Johan Museu.
George Hincapie is going to have to play a very seriously good tactical game right now, because I keep forgetting about Freddie Rodriguez. We just look at Freddie Rodriguez as being in the United States National Champions jersey, so when they do come back to the front, Domo Farm Frites are going to have 5 guys against 2. That will really put them in a superbly strong position right now. You can hardly see the national champion of the United States' jersey right there. It's totally brown and brown from the mud, which has really come down over this last hour of racing.
Well, it's a very nice solid little chase group they've got going here, and that's Thierry Gouvenou, who has dropped back from the leaders, and he's coming back up again in the chase group. Well, Patrick Lefevre, he's going to be feeling very content with the way his team is riding right now. The Domo boys, they, as Paul has said, could have 5 riders up in the lead if it all works out for them, with last year's winner Servais Canavan right in the thick of the action again. Truly remarkable. We're looking here at the chase group, still working away, and the latest time gap, Paul, is around 50 seconds, I think, still.
Still hovering around the 50-second mark, but there are a lot of passengers. We can see here Bedrogi has managed to recover once he's got onto the smoother section of road, and he's rejoined that leading group and swelled their numbers back up to 8. But the man who is sitting at the back there for US Postal Service is now basically just waiting to be joined by his leader, and I think that is also the same scenario for the 2 riders from Domo Farm Frites as well. They know that they're strongly represented in the group behind with Freddie Rodriguez, Canavan and Johan Museu, and they want the whole of the race to come back together.
A little bit of a slowing down here, which I think will bring the leaders back together if they continue like this, with Nico Martin on the front, and that's Cassani reaching for his back pocket. And the man just passing through our camera was the blackboard man. It's a green board in this event, and they were showing the riders the exact time gaps and the composition. We're actually peeling across here the town of Auchy-les-Auchy as we head on now towards sector 10. 8 riders in that breakaway, so just to remind you where we are, we've done 207 kilometers of the Paris-Roubaix now, remaining some 53 kilometers, 10 zones of pavé as we're about to enter Auchy-à-Bercy. This is a nasty little sector of pavé, which I think might see a coming together of the 2 groups, but it's always hard to predict now, Paul.
It is always very hard to predict, and this next section of cobblestones, Phil, is very difficult indeed. The section known as Bercy is a section which in the past has always been very, very difficult in the wet and muddy conditions. We're looking now at the man taking up position number 8 in the leading group of riders, Laszlo Bodrogi, the Hungarian rider, and a lot of maneuvering going on right now. The Domo riders, I think, just waiting and wishing that their man Johan Museu, Canavan and Freddie Rodriguez would come to the front of this bike race. Hincapie's going to be put into a severe amount of difficulty right now. He thought he'd done the ideal thing by isolating Johan Museu a few moments ago, but that has not happened. In fact, Museu's team once again in Paris-Roubaix have come back to show that they are a force in numbers.
Well, Martin has tried there to liven this breakaway up. He has sensed that he's waiting now for the arrival of Museu. Hincapie, certainly the Domo boys here are not going to do any work now that they know 3 more teammates are coming towards them, and Martin doesn't want them up, quite rightly so. He's tried to incite a little bit of reaction, but it doesn't look as though it's had much success. And now they're having a chat at the front, the 2 riders there from Big Mat and Cofidis. Here we are back with chase group number 2. Fred Rodriguez riding alongside team captain Museu. Stefan Westermann driving through there. Max Shanley reaching for food in his back pocket. And George Hincapie for the moment having a little bit of a breather at the back.
Shenry looking as if he's actually just come out from a day in the park, because he's
quite
the only
clean,
guy who is not dirty at all.
Yeah.
I think he's probably taken off his over jacket there just to make sure that in this part of the course he doesn't overheat too much, but he's looking very smart right now, and if I was to pick a man who looks the best in this group, I have to say Shandry is looking superb right now. Do you know, at the front though, Nico Martin is not going to get any help from the other guys in the break, because they want the race to come back together right now. And the best thing that George Hincapie can do is try and blow the race apart as soon as possible to isolate Johan Museu once more.
Well, this is going to be an intriguing last hour of racing in Paris Roubaix. Here we are onto this pavé section number 10 now, which leaves us some 52 kilometers from the finish, and it is Hans de Klerk driving on, and they've got a few help here now because Matan is also there, and again immediately Bodrogi is in trouble. He really has grown to hate the pavé here today, and it looks like this time he may lose too much ground, Paul, but he would stand a reasonable chance of coming back with the chase group.
It looks as if everything has gone out of Laszlo Bodroga here. No sight, no sound. And this is what happens when you really blow on the cobblestones. You see the front end of his bike there is bouncing as if it's hitting every cobblestone that there is out there. And that is, once your power has gone, you just don't seem to be able to float over the cobblestones as the big men do who have the superpower. And in fact, he's lost it completely, and that's going to cause a bit of chaos behind, because I don't think the Museo Hincapie group is too far off the back of this car containing the race referee.
No, this is the danger, of course, on these stretches when the cars stop and block up the route, because they must be coming up at quite a fair speed now. And poor old Laszlo is in all sorts of trouble here now. It's not so much a mechanical as his legs are no longer part of his body. I think he has blown to the world. It's been a long, long time in the lead for him, with 52 kilometers still to ride. They got away after 31. This has been a long breakaway for the Hungarian, and I think he's feeling like he's had enough. And there's the group come through, so they've got him. He's gone through, and that's the Hincapie group going on.
He's obviously not enjoying his Paris-Roubaix at the moment. But when the lights go out, it really is almost impossible to keep your bike in a straight line on those cobblestones. And you get an idea now just how close behind Johan Museo and Georgi Hincapie are. It's still Matin on the front for Team Cofidis of France, and he's the man basically who has to keep setting the pacemaking, because he doesn't have any friends in this group right now, because nearly everybody here is going to get caught in a few moments' time.
Well, very soon we're going to have 14 riders in the front of Paris-Roubaix. Sadly, one will not be Laszlo Bodrogi, but George Hincapie will be there.
Nico Matin at the front of the group, but now Johan Museo on this section of cobblestones is completely shadowed by Georgi Hincapie. It's almost a replay of last week's Tour of Flanders when the big names have come out to play. It's amazing the way this last few Paris-Roubaix have been, Phil, because the race has been decided so far from the finish line. We now probably only have about 20 names who've got a chance here of winning Paris-Roubaix, yes. And we're still over an hour of racing from the finishing line.
That's absolutely right. I can't see the others coming back on. Eric Zabel is one of the noted men. He's trapped in a group along with Andrea Taffi and Daniela Nardello. The last time we saw them, we think they are around about a minute and 15, minute 30 seconds away from the front group, but I can't see them bridging that gap unless they become rather inspired now towards the finish.
See how clever Johan Museo was there. He started riding quite slowly on those cobblestones, and he forced Hincapie to come to the front so that Hincapie would be the man setting the pace, making all over this section of cobbles. And if a guy decides to set the pace on a section of cobblestones, he can be on the front for over a kilometer of riding. This is the leading group now, which has lost one or two men off the back, including Laszlo Bodroga, who just could not ride over the cobblestones anymore. And the man setting the pace, as he has done for the last kilometer or so, is Nico Matin, the Belgian rider, who certainly has not got any friends at all in this group, because all of the guys on his wheel right now, Phil, have got teammates in the group behind, and it's just a question of time right now until it all comes back together.
But they're making them work hard to bring it back together, especially Nico Matin. He is riding superbly and riding very well indeed, I think. Max van Heeswijk is in there. And there's Tom Boonen now. Look at his bike there, completely caked in mud. So this is Max. The other one was Cassani. And Ralf Schweder, Tristan Hoffmann also riding extremely well.
You can see Max van Heeswijk now also looking pretty clean, like Max Chiandri is in the back group. And the reason for that is he's taken off his thermal jacket right now to keep himself just around about the right temperature, because as we get into the tougher part of this course and the speed is brought higher and higher, riders are always a little bit worried about overheating, and they want to make sure that once they get to the serious part of racing, that everything is spot on for them.
The crowd's here running across to grab sight of the epic battle of the pavé, as we're now on sector number 10. Matin pushing on the pace, but Tom Boonen taking much closer order now as he drops onto third wheel.
Only 5 riders left in this leading group right now, Phil, and Boonen is doing an absolutely superb ride to stay up there with everybody. With Nico Martin, the man doing all of the pacemaking on the front of this pack. I have to say once again, Boonen is doing a great job.
Well, thanks, Frankie. What a great manager Patrick Lefevere's been too, sweeping that podium 4 times with the top 3. The first time he did it, we thought we'd never live to see it happen again. Well, this is becoming a super pursuit now. We've got 7 leaders and 7 chasers, and they still, Paul, have not quite come together.
I'm quite surprised, and the only reason it hasn't come all together really is because of the work being done on the front of that group there by Nico Martin. It looks now as if this second group is starting to split up a bit. That's Johan Museo on the front, trying to put time between himself and George Hincapie. Hincapie has lost 4 or 5 bicycle lengths. Then it's Stefan Weissermann. The next man along there is Maximilian Schiandri. Going off the back of the group there was Lars Mikkelsen. And right now, Museo is the man who's trying to put the hammer down, but Hincapie's right on his wheel.
The man missing is Freddy Rodriguez. No sign of him just now, but Hincapie has gone himself right up there to Johan Museo. It says a lot about the American. He is fighting, and one day is going to climb on that podium, and let's hope it's today. He's again in the thick of the action here. Museo putting in a big attack. This is very typical Museo now. It hasn't worked, so he wants everybody else to come and do the work. Stefan Weissermann has come up, so we've got 3 very good men in the chase now. And I'm not so sure whether Lars Mikkelsen will get back. He looked to be going back quite quickly.
He looked as if he may well have popped just there a few moments ago. But after the Tour of Flanders, George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong actually sat down together, Phil, and looked at the videotape of the film as Schiandri comes back here. Armstrong went through it with George Hincapie and explained to him how he felt he may well have made a few tactical mistakes. And I think since then, he actually said to me this morning, the great thing is Lance spoke to me about just how great a bike rider he was and how he takes control of a race. And I think today we're going to see George Hincapie try and take control of this race in the last 25 or 30 Ks.
Well, Lance Armstrong back home in Texas today because he is taking part in his Cancer Foundation Ride for the Roses. And let's hope he's catching time to watch this too. George Hincapie, the rider who has 3 times made the top 6 in Paris Roubaix, and you don't get an easy ride in this event, and George has always been an animator of this event this past few years. These are the leaders still being driven on by Nico Martin as we now leave behind us the Auchy and Berzé stretch of cobblestones. The group is now just 34 seconds clear as we cross the town of Berzé itself. The next section of cobblestones about 2.5 kilometers away.
It's been a very long, hard chase right now, and I'm quite surprised that they haven't got across quite that quickly, but it's all really because of the work of one man on this leading group, which is now down to just 5 riders. Nico Martin has wanted to make sure that he delays the arrival of the big men coming up from the rear of this bike race. Enrico Cassani too, there at the back there, wearing number 2, has also had a very good classics campaign, and he is a man that the Domo Farm Fritz team has counted on a lot over the last five days of bike racing.
Well, we're looking down at Stefan Weissermann leading the chase here. 1 rider up ahead. I think he's now returning from the front group. Looks as though it might be Tristan Hoffmann. He's now coming back towards this chase group, which is still 4 men strong: Museo, Hincapie, Weissermann and Max Schiandri. And we're looking here now at the legs of the rider who has been doing very well today, Max van Heeswijk. Is still staying in this lead group of 5, but a very select little group it is. These are the last survivors of that 31-man breakaway, which went after 31 kilometers. Hoffmann now looks over his shoulder, takes quick account of who is in this group. It's a good one. I better get in with it, and let's hope he can hang on the back, because it could well be going back up to the leaders now. And George Hincapie and Johan Museo very shortly are once again going to be head-to-head.
Quick look there, you can see in fact Lars Mikkelsen did recover, Phil, and pull himself back after being dropped on the last section of cobblestones. They're pulling all the motorbikes out of the gap right now, and that will indicate to the leading group of riders that very shortly they'll be joined by the heads of state of Paris Roubaix. Johan Museo right now must be feeling very confident in the possibility of winning this bike race for a 3rd time. Maximilian Schiandri, I think, riding his best race at Paris Roubaix over recent years. As we look back there to Servais Carnarvon and Freddie Rodriguez, we get a chance just to see where they are in the race. It is such a complicated race to cover Paris Roubaix because there are bike riders and cars all over the place. And I have a funny feeling that Freddie Rodriguez and Carnarvon, in fact, as we look back there, Hans de Klerk has stopped at the side of the road. There's a problem with his machine there. He's actually getting a spare bike. The mechanic is up there and running very quickly. He's probably lost around about 15 seconds with that change, but he will very shortly be up and running again.
Well, I think he'll be okay because he was so lucky it happened when it did. A good stretch of road, a good bike change. I thought for a moment he was going to run to Roubaix, but he did wait for the spare bike, and hopefully he'll get back into the thick of the action. But back onto the next sector of Pavé now. This will be at Mons-en-Pévèle, 1,000 meters, and this is sector number 9. Now, can they all come together here? Lars Mikkelsen. As we're looking here now at the back of the rider, Raphael Schroeder, we are with the leaders again. Tom Boonen just in front, a little bit of a traffic block ahead of the riders here. And one of the motorbikes has come down. That's the problem. Nobody gets spurred in this Queen of the Classics. You've just got to get up and get out of the way as fast as you can. And so the riders now are still at grips with Pavé sector number 9, which means that they are now looking at just about 47 kilometers to the finish. Well, Paul, we're looking down here at the composition of the chase group. We've seen motorbikes go down on this stretch of cobbles, Pavé number 9, and they've got about 27 miles to race.
Well, they're not far behind right now. There are the leading group of 5. It's not much more now than 100 meters. Georgi Hincapie very shortly will be seeing his teammate Tom Boonen. The big advantage now tilting back towards Hincapie because Hincapie has managed to eliminate Servais Carnarvon and Freddie Rodriguez from the group. They were the great allies a few moments ago for Johan Museo, but right now it's going to go back to a more manageable situation. It's going to be 4 Domo riders against 2 men from the US Postal Service. But the team doing a great ride here today are the guys in the yellow jerseys, the Team Coast, a new team really to the top of the sport of professional cycling. Schroeder is the man in the front. Lars Mikkelsen, a former winner of Ghent-Wevelgem, is in the second group with Georgi Hincapie, and as he said to you, he really does believe he's got brilliant form at the moment. On the back there, 93, that's Tristan Hoffmann, who a few moments ago was in the leading group. One of the early morning breakaway of 31 riders who never really got themselves a huge time gap to be a serious challenge for the overall win today.
7 of them trying to make contact with the 5 survivors, soon a group of 12, and there will be new tactics coming into play here. But it is good to see Team Coast. They had a disastrous year last year. This year they've had a much better start. They've got a new management team there with Marcel Wust. The top German cyclist had that terrible crash and had to retire. In fact, when he lost an eye, and I was chatting with Marcel this morning, I don't know if you realise, Paul, but he's had a perfect eye made, and you can't tell the difference. And he says, I've got 2 eyes, but I can only see out of 1. He's lost none of his sense of humour, but he'd be so happy today that he now has all of these riders in this front group. Whether they can win, I'm not so sure.
Well, Marcel Wust has always been a great bike rider, had an awful lot of professional wins, more than 80, I think, off the top of my head. And it's good to see him staying in the sport to offer an awful lot of the knowledge that he garnered over a very illustrious career.
Yep.
The junction is about to be made here, Phil. Stefan Weissermann not having the problems he had last year with those problems with his cleats when there was seemed to be as if an awful lot of dirt and mud had got into those cleats, but today everything seems to be on hand for him. We're now going to look at a reforming at the front end of the main field, and we will have 12 leaders once again, but an awful lot of Domo Farm Fritz riders. Hincapie can count on just one man, the man he's counted on since the 3 days of Le Panne about 10 days ago, Tom Boonen, the 21-year-old Belgian, former under-23 champion of his own country, but now very much a part of the US Postal Service one-day classic riding team.
Well, this is now passing through the town of Mons-en-Pévèle, and this is where we now have brought 12 men together, and we're going to see a really fine last few kilometres now. If none of these riders have any further bad luck, and they've all had their fair share today, then we're going to see a battle royale, I think. There are still 8 sectors to come. The next sector will be with us in about 4 kilometres from now. I'm delighted to say that Max Chandry has made the split here. It's quite an international breakaway, this. Riders from Holland, Germany, from Denmark, and now we've got, of course, the American riders here as well. And Max van Heeswijk will be happy to see the arrival of team captain Johan Museeuw.
It's going to be tough over the next few sections of cobblestones, because those guys that have just been caught were part of that early morning breakaway of 31 riders, Phil, and I feel almost certain right now that the group that has formed at the front will split on one of these next section of cobblestones, because they want to reduce the numbers to make sure everybody keeps working in the leading group. Museeuw looking pretty comfortable there, with George Hincapie just behind him. Coming through now, Stefan Weseman also looking good, and that's the face at the back there of Tom Boonen. Tristan Hoffman is in this group as well, and Max van Heeswijk, he's the man on the back of the group here. He'll be doing an awful lot of work there for Johan Museeuw later on in this race, Paris Roubaix.
"44 kilometers to go for the riders, and 12 riders now in the front. Domo well represented. Tom Boonen, the sensation, sat at the back now. George Hincapie driving at the front of the race at last. Now there's nothing between George and the finishing line except these 11 riders, and that's Cassani now, who's becoming almost unrecognizable. Going back to the cars here, this is Freddy Rodriguez. Last year's winner at the back is Servaes Knaven. Hans de Klerk, with a bike change, remember, is slowly coming back up to the group, which could give us a very strong 15, but they've got a bridge 27 seconds.
Well, they may well do it. There's a long straight section of road. It all really depends on how men like Johan Museeuw decide to ride. He may well try and back it off just a little bit and allow his two teammates to reintegrate the group. Once again, the balance turning against Georgi Hincapie, because if those two riders from Domo Farm Frites get forward, Hincapie is going to have a situation where it's 5 against 2. But maybe we've been backing the wrong American horse today. There's always the big possibility that Freddy Rodriguez is going to be the big American star to get onto the podium.
Well, a lot of people have fancied Fred for the win today. He is riding superbly well, and at the moment we're looking at the man who wears number 1, who won the race for Holland. Very few Dutch cyclists have ever won Paris-Roubaix. We've had Jan Janssen, Jan Raas a couple of times. Peter Post, who still holds the record of this race, but really a handful, that's all, has ever won this race. Henny Kuiper also rode it very successfully. He's also known how to lose it with a lot of bad luck as well. He's watching it today, by the way, not far away from where we are sitting. Now that's the gap, and we're looking down below us at Knaven, Rodriguez and Hans de Klerk after his bike change, chasing at 12 riders in the lead. This is the front group now, led by George Hincapie. There's a nice close-up there as we look here. The big danger yet again in a race from Paris to Roubaix, and he said Bordeaux, because you know when this first began back in 1896, this was actually a training race for the great Bordeaux-Paris race, rather, behind little Derny motorbikes. Then of course it became very much a race in its own right, and sadly Bordeaux-Paris is no longer with us. We're looking at the action here now, right on the nose of this year's 100th Paris-Roubaix. And the riders are slowing down a little bit now, because now they're getting, they've got to think this one through as they're heading up towards the next sector of Pavé. And this will be Pavé number 8 at Mérigny. You wouldn't think the cobblestones exist in that beautiful setting, would you? But they're just around the corner. And at the moment too, the rain has gone away again, and the sky, if anything, is looking a little bit brighter. So the riders may get a bit of a break as they come into this final 25 miles of this year's Paris-Roubaix. All started with a breakaway of 31. Now all of them have been caught by the top riders of the expected top riders, rather, at Paris-Roubaix. Stefan Weseman, he was 7th last year, had endless problems with his shoe cleats, didn't sort them out in the end, and he was out of the hunt for the final sprint. The 19-second gap there is to the 3 chasers, Servaes Knaven, Fred Rodriguez, the USA champion, and Hans de Klerk, who's had a bike change. And I don't think that Knaven's had any problems today, but Rodriguez has certainly fallen, had punctures, and de Klerk has had a bike change. As we race now onto Pavé sector number 8, which leaves us 41 kilometers to go to the finish. Not too long, this one, at 700 meters, but a chance to see if we've got any weak riders sitting there at the back.
15 seconds is the gap back to the three riders, Carnavin, Rodriguez and Hans de Klerk. So they're just about holding it right now. But this little bit of acceleration on the front from Lars Mikkelsen. There's in fact one or two riders slipped off the road there. It looked as if it was Stefan Weissermann. Just had to take a little bit of deviationary action there to keep himself upright. But it really is a slippy section of cobblestone. In fact, de Klerk has crashed. Rodriguez has missed it there. Fortunately for him, that was de Klerk who just went down there. It looked as if Freddie Rodriguez survived. He was just getting himself onto the back end of the group there when this incident happened. And Servaes Carnavin too managed to keep himself upright.
Well, that's bad luck for the Belgian. And also for Freddie Rodriguez, because they're applying the pressure now. Meanwhile, here we go again. Move back to the front, and whenever the road becomes cobbled, Johan Museeuw gives it every ounce of strength he has left. Mikkelsen and Hincapie are trying to get on terms.
Johan Museeuw once again has come out here at Paris Roubaix. He's put the hammer down. He was waiting for a moment to try and split the group, but he's caught everybody by surprise here right now. That was a very slippy section of cobblestones. He's obviously got his tyre pressures to absolute perfection. Lars Mikkelsen right now is a few hundred meters behind with Georgi Hincapie. Hincapie right now must hammer home and try and bridge the gap to this man, because otherwise he's going to fly.
You know, he's absolutely superb, but the fact is that there's nobody can ride the cobblestones like Johan Museeuw can, and this man just goes. He's 36 years of age now, and he doesn't talk of growing old, he talks of moving into his second youth, and this man seems to be proving just that at the moment. Winner of Paris-Roubaix in 1990, here we go again, this is how he did it, 1996 and 2000, Paris-Roubaix winner on the attack now. He waited till Lars Mikkelsen made the move, and then he went over the top of him.
Unbelievable, complete and utter acceleration here. We're now looking at 40 kilometers to go to the finish. That's going to take around about an hour to an hour and 10 minutes in these weather conditions and road conditions. But Johan Museeuw has gone out on the attack. He's got around about 15 seconds over these two riders, Hincapie and Lars Mikkelsen. But what an unbelievable acceleration, Phil, there by Johan Museeuw. He waited for Lars Mikkelsen to go to the front. Not going fast enough, thank you very much for me, and he came tumbling up the inside and just opened up the throttle.
Yes, I'm not sure whether Mikkelsen will be strong enough for George. So the situation now, that attack has come at 40 kilometers from the finish. It came when we were riding on sector 8 at the halfway through the debut of the Pavé de Marigny, and leaving us 219 kilometers covered, 41 to go. Museeuw has left the group behind. It's a long way to ride to the end, and Johan will know that as well as anybody. A massive crowd here now as we move into the area of Pont-à-Marc, and it looks to me as though he's going to try and hold them off to the finish. So it's all down to the others now to bridge the gap, and I'm just wondering if they can.
Well, it's going to be very difficult, because Museeuw's got the advantage of, in around about 3 kilometers time, there's another section of cobblestones, and it's this section of cobblestones where Johan Museeuw will try and increase his advantage. Right now, it's Johan Museeuw on the attack one more time, and Hincapie seems to have been caught out behind.
Yes, well, looking there at Mikkelsen and Hincapie back in the group. They're going to have to reassemble, and they're going to have to call up Tom Boonen. Well, he's still up for it, and Boonen now has got to chase down Museeuw.
It's going to be tough for Tom Boonen, because he's been at the front of the bike race now for around about 220 kilometers of racing, Phil. He will have an awful lot of pain in his young legs, 21-year-old legs right now, and he's got to chase a man who is known as the Vlaamse, the Lion of Flanders. Museeuw knows how to win this bike race from any different combination, because he's done it before, but he has also ridden this kind of situation where he's gone out on the attack from an awful long way to the finish. Once he gets to the cobblestone sections, he absolutely flies, and he will know, because that group is 12 men strong, there'll be a lot of animosity in the group with no organization, especially when you know that he's got an awful lot of his own teammates in that group.
Well, he's going to rely heavily on them slowing it down now, because he decided to go very early. It's either a huge mistake or it's going to be the best move of his life, and he's not waiting for them now. I think in a race like Paris-Roubaix, it's like no other bike race. You have to sense when it comes your way, you've got to take your chance. And as we move now onto the next section of Pavé here now, Pavé number 7, which puts us on the Pont Thibault.
Well, right now we're looking at Johan Museo going first onto that section of cobblestones, but what's going to have to happen here is George Hincapie is going to have to take a serious move and control this bike race, because if he doesn't, Johan Museo will increase his advantage over the rest. This is the second group. The advantage of Museo right now, not very much more than 10 or 15 seconds. We can see on the front is Boonen. In second place is Georgie Hincapie. And it looks as if now Boonen is really putting his life on the line for his team leader, Hincapie.
Well, it's the battle now of Pavé, Sector 7, 38 kilometres from the finish to the 100th Paris-Roubaix. Johan Museo has gone. His gap is 10 seconds now. And Hincapie has gone back into the group and tried to marshal his teammate Tom Boonen to counter the move. They're certainly not out of it, Paul, and in fact, I've got a feeling they're going to ride back to Museo.
They may well do that. Did you see the face there on Tom Boonen? He is riding at the top end of the international echelon. There's confirmation of the gap of Johan Museo back to the group containing Hincapie and all the other favourites, just 16 seconds. But Museo right now, Phil, is on his own terrain. He's on the cobblestones. He's using a monster gear. He's ticking it over. There are rumours round the peloton that today he decided to use 180mm cranks. Now that is 1 centimetre bigger than most cranks most bike riders will use. Boonen, look at that. He's been at the front of the bike race a long time. Hincapie looks very calm and very relaxed behind. Mikkelsen taking up. There coming along then is Cassani. Gouvenou is still there as well. Max van Heeswijk, Tristan Hoffman. No sign at all of the comeback of the two other Domo riders. Freddie Rodriguez, who was almost in an accident before. Always, Phil, amazes me to see Museo go round these cobblestone corners, because you know what? They are so slippery, and the back end of this guy's bike hardly moves at all.
It is so fitting that a man of the stature of Johan Museo is leading the 100th edition of this great race, the battle against the cobblestones. Men like the Gitan, Roger de Vlaming, Francesco Moser, they were the stars, but if this man wins today, he'll have 3 victories too, and one's got to feel that that's the way history should be written.
It would be brilliant. You know, it's very difficult to know who exactly I want to win this bike race. Johan Museo has been a champion of the classics. He's the kind of man who's put in some brilliant performances in the one-day races, like Paris-Roubaix previously, like the Tour of Flanders. I'd love him to win this bike race for a 3rd time, but I'd also like to see Georgie Hincapie come up and be the first American to win Paris-Roubaix, because Hincapie, I think, has got absolutely superb form. Whenever we see him, Phil, whenever we look back to that group with Hincapie, he looks very relaxed and the legs are ticking over perfectly.
Well, gone from the group there now, Max Chiandri and the big workhorse Nico Matan. They've lost ground. Whether they come back, well, who knows? But this man has decided to break them up. I don't think there's hardly anyone now able or willing to help George Hincapie except Tom Boonen, and Boonen can't have much fuel left in his tank right now. Very soon, Hincapie, I think, is going to be isolated.
Well, he's going to have to do something special over one of the next sections of cobblestones. This is Max Chiandri just off the back of the group here. He was left behind a little bit on that group there, but you see you have to recover and try and get back to the group as quickly as possible. Chiandri's looking pretty good right now, and I'm fairly certain his dad will be watching this back in Los Angeles and his Italian restaurant. But I think they will all be pretty amazed by the work on the front of this group of the young 21-year-old Tom Boonen from Belgium, who is riding the race of his career so far for Georgie Hincapie in 2nd position.
Well, sitting there at the back is the Max van Heeswijk, rather. And this is the man at the front. Just look at his face now. Everything committed here. Johan Museo. What a marvellous piece of riding it is. The crowd are roaring him on here. They're almost Belgian in this part of France. And he knows this road as well as any Frenchman. And he is giving it everything, every acceleration out of these corners now, as Johan Museo is heading towards a Pavé Sector 6 of the 26. He's running out of cobblestones and he's running into what he hopes will be victory by the end.
Museo really pounding a huge...
Oh, there's a crash, Paul.
Yeah, there's a few guys gone down there. There's a Domo rider gone down. That looks like Max van Heeswijk is on the ground. And this on one of the smooth sections of road right now. Let's have a look at the chaos there. Another one of... Mikkelsen has gone down as well. He was the leader of the Team Coast. A little bit further up, there's a red jersey there. I think that is probably Thierry Gouvenou, because at the moment we've still got Hans de Klerk behind this group. He never quite managed to make the junction, but this is just what happens. It seems like a nice piece of road. There's no problem at all. You come round a corner and boom, you find yourself on the ground.
Well, Max won't believe his bad luck, Paul. I was saying earlier, his whole season so far has been a story of bad luck. He's had the form and he's been in the positions, and now it's happened to him yet again. This is now Chandri, who'd only just contacted the rear of the breakaway. Tristan Hoffman is waiting. Look how this is split up now, because way in the distance there, it looks to me like both the US Postal boys have gone.
It is. It's Tom Boonen and George Hincapie, and they are now riding a 2-up team time trial. Unbelievable. The race is changing once again.
Well, there was the crash, and this is how it happened on a simple right-hand bend. That was a nasty, heavy fall for Maxi van Heeswijk. I think we can go up to the leaders here now, and it was Lars Mikkelsen who lost it. There must have been something on that corner, because Gouvenou went completely on his own volition, taking out Max and slowing down Tristan Hoffman. All of this happening behind Johan Museeuw. His mouth is wide open. He's catching air and he's riding on towards a victory in Paris-Roubaix. Around about 20 miles to go, but the US Postal boys, they're on an airmail situation here now. They have not given up. And this man, Tom Boonen, is worth his weight in gold.
Absolutely brilliant. You can see the top half of his body starting to rock just a little bit now. He's absolutely burying himself. He looks across at his team leader there, George Hincapie. He'd said he wanted to support Hincapie to absolute perfection in Paris-Roubaix, and you can't get very much better than that. They are now trying to close the gap to the one lone leader, Johan Museeuw. The time gap is still around about the 20-second mark, but Hincapie's in a good situation right now. The chaos behind from that crash has left that group splattered all over the north of France, and Boonen, Phil, he keeps wanting to come back to the front. He's giving every last little bit of energy that his body can muster.
It's unbelievable. You can't speak highly enough of this rider. 21 years of age, his very first season as a pro. He is riding like this man, Museeuw, is coming towards the end of his career, and Boonen has got all of the responsibility now to plant Hincapie back in the lead. But because of the crash, they are freed of the passengers now. They've got rid of the metal balls around their ankles, and they're able to try and have a shot at Johan Museeuw direct.
Johan Museeuw, absolute powerhouse of a man. He's won the Tour of Flanders 3 times. He's won Paris-Roubaix twice. And right now he's powering himself into a lone lead off the front of this group.
We are watching history in the making here now, at least for possibly Johan Museeuw and possibly for the United States, because right now Hincapie is in a podium position and no Americans ever got in the top 3.
And they've got a teammate in there as well. There is the time gap. It's 24 seconds from the lone leader, Johan Museeuw, back to the 2 chasers from the US Postal Service. But they are now going through the town of Templeuve, and very shortly, Phil, they will be coming up to the next section of cobblestones, which is a long section of cobblestones. And there, if Georgie Hincapie has got those legs, he has to do what Lance Armstrong told him to do last week after looking at the Tour of Flanders tapes. Take the race by the horns, give it to the opposition. Don't let them dictate the pressure of the bike race to you. You are the man who has to lead, and you are the man who has to dominate. We're now coming up to the next section of cobblestones. This is number 6. It will be the section of the Pavé de Moulin de Vertin, and it is a long and disgusting section. There is the Moulin, the windmill, which is turning round to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Paris-Roubaix. Museeuw is the first man onto those cobblestones, and 20 seconds behind him he should see the US Postal train of George Hincapie and Tom Boonen.
Now, this is a rather muddy stretch. It's only half a kilometre, but it is usually battered by the weather. As you can see, there's not much protecting it, and the surface itself is not the best. Here we go, over Le Moulin de Vertin, and in the lead is Johan Museeuw, the master of the cobbles, the Lion of Flanders, the king of the mountains. He's fantastic when he gets onto these stones. He just goes quicker, and I think this is where he'll knock a couple of seconds into these 2 US Postal boys. But they are superb. A massive crowd is out for this 100th. When we left Compiègne this morning, I think it was the biggest crowd I've seen in that beautiful city to see the Paris-Roubaix off on its 100th edition. And we're seeing the newcomers try to tame the old line, and I'm not so sure they can.
Well, they're having a hard time. The gap is staying exactly the same all of the time. You see, with a man like Johan Museeuw, you have to be on his wheel when he attacks, because when you give him 100 meters advantage, it is very difficult to nail that back. This is the third group on the road. They're around about 20 seconds themselves behind the group there of George Hincapie and Tom Boonen. That is Thierry Gouvenou in the group as well. You can see the Lampre rider, Maximilien Chianri. Nico Martin is there a little bit further forward as well. But this section of cobblestones has really blown the race apart. We've got now, off the end of this section of cobblestone, 6 kilometers before we go to the very long section, the section of Sizouin. And I think if Johan Museeuw is still away by then, it's going to be very difficult for the US Postal guys to pull him back into the field, because he will feel more confident as he gets closer to the finish and closer to the cobblestones that he knows, the sections at Sizouin, Quinfin-en-Pavel, and of course the most difficult one remaining, the Carrefour de l'Arbre.
Well, there's still some 8 kilometers of the cobbled roads lying ahead of Johan Museeuw. He's now out of sector number 6, and he's well into his time trialing rhythm here. The ex-world champion, the man who has been the king of this queen of the classics on 2 previous occasions. He's been placed as well. And George now is free of the other riders. And remember, no American has ever finished on the podium at Paris Roubaix. George Hincapie has finished 4th in '99 and in 2001. He's also had a 6th, but now he wants a top 3 at least, and he's in the finest position to get it.
Hincapie's teammate there, Phil, I really don't know where he's getting his strength from today. He's able to recuperate, he's able to come up and work with George, having been in that early morning breakaway. He really must be digging deep into his resources to try and find just a little bit more. In the group behind there is Max van Heesewijk. He went down in that crash just a few moments ago. What this group wants to do now, the group containing the Domo Farm Frites riders, is pull themselves back to George Hincapie. Museeuw now goes past the sign indicating 30 kilometers to go, 18 miles away from winning this race for the 3rd time.
Well, I know that all of Belgium will be willing him on. I'm not sure that most of France will also be doing the same thing, but he is a man now who is doing what we haven't seen for a while. That's blaze a lonely trail in Paris-Roubaix. Johan Museeuw being pursued by a Belgian and an American. So the gap, Paul, 35 seconds now to these 2 chasers as they too go past the 30-kilometer barrier. The remnants of the breakaway behind, but I'm not sure that they've got the enthusiasm left in them to catch up with these 2.
Well, it will be bad news for them when they start to get those time checks being communicated, because it's starting to stretch out. The last time check we had was 24 seconds to Johan Museeuw. It is now 35 seconds. Hincapie is very shortly going to have to make a very serious decision, Phil, as to whether or not to go out alone. He's getting a lot of help here from Tom Boonen. Boonen must shortly start to fatigue because he's been at the front of the bike race for a long time. Hincapie looks so smooth, so calm and so fluid in his pedaling action. He's very shortly going to have to make the decision to go alone in pursuit of Johan Museeuw if he wants to win this bike race today.
Well, he's 5 kilometers from the next sector of Pavé at Sizouin, and that is a tough kilometer length of bad cobbles there. And you know, every time he reaches the cobbles, this man seems to gain a couple of seconds. He rides them so well. He's taken a huge gamble going at 40 kilometers from the finish. He's been out front now for just over 10. He doesn't look like a man who's getting weaker, does he? They are the faces of the hunter and the hunted. And it looks as though George Hincapie is going to have to now make a big decision, like Paul has said, and have a real go to hunt him down quickly. The closer this man gets to the finish, then the better he's going to feel.
Huge gear that he's pounding there. This man has got so much power in his legs. It really is hard to believe that he's going to retire at the end of this season. And I think with a win under his belt today, he may well come back and see if he can't make it just one more win in the Tour of Flanders as well next year. Because when you've got the form like that, it's not worth stopping a career.
Well, win or lose now, Johan Museeuw can return to Belgium with his head held high. He's again be the man of Paris-Roubaix, and this the 100th edition. He's also riding so well this week. Just looking now at Johan Museeuw as the cameras pull back to the two chasers, George Hincapie and Tom Boonen, both members of the US Postal Service. These two riders are now mano a mano to try and bring back Johan Museeuw. We are 28 kilometers from the finish for Museeuw and 35 seconds further away for these two.
They're now coming into the town of Sizouin, and then they will have that very long 1,000-meter section of cobblestones, and I think it is there that Georgie Hincapie must try and bridge the gap up to Johan Museeuw if he wants to be the first American to win Paris-Roubaix this year. There are the two chasers, and round the corner and out of sight right now is Johan Museeuw. He knows this course to perfection. He will feel very much at home, and he will be lifted by the fact that he's opening up an advantage all of the time. The time gap there is 41 seconds to Hincapie and Boonen, and then a minute 14 back to the group containing a couple of teammates of Johan Museeuw and the French rider doing a great ride there, Thierry Gouvenou.
So the situation at the moment now, we are in Sizouin at 26 kilometers from the finish. We're heading now for sector number 5, which is 1,000 meters of pavé of Sizouin, the rough ones, and Johan Museeuw is going to see them first by just about that 35 seconds. Just look at his face now as he continues to concentrate. He never looks over his shoulder. This is where the bike race is right now. Here's a little word in his ear just to keep him hyped up, I think.
Good to see the man driving the car there alongside him. The man who in previous years has ridden so many of these one-day classics, Wilfred Peters. And I wonder what he feels like right now driving the car alongside the man who just a year ago was his team leader.
Yes, and working so well to help Museeuw win his race. That's Wilfred Peters. And Johan very sad, he says, but we all do grow old, and he misses the fact that Wilfred Peters doesn't room with him on the big races anymore. But at least he can be alongside him in a far more comfortable seat than Museeuw has right now. But he will have given him just a word of advice he wants to hear, saying it's good, you're cool, and you've got 25, 26 kilometers to go to the finish.
I think Hincapie right now has got to make a serious decision, Phil, because there is only 30 seconds right now between the two groups here, the group of Boonen and Hincapie and the group behind containing the remnants of this leading group a few moments ago. I seriously believe if he wants to win the bike race, he's got to go on his own right now, and especially once we get to this section of cobblestones. He's got to ride like the wind and see if he cannot bridge up the gap to Johan Museeuw, but maybe Museeuw is just too strong for everybody in this bike race once again.
He's demonstrating enormous strength today. And he's now into the town of Sizouin, and look at the crowd here. They know who he is because he's not very far away before he crosses the borders into his hometown of Belgium. And he's got himself a lovely rhythm. He's pulling away. He's added some 10 seconds in the last couple of kilometers to his advantage. 45 it is now. It's nudging out to a minute. You can see the roads are wet, but thankfully the rain has now gone away, and I think it might stay that way until he comes down to the finishing line.
Seems as if the clouds have lifted a bit and the blue sky is starting to come across from the border of Belgium here, maybe to salute a victory to Johan Museeuw. Where's number 6? The leader of the team this year wearing number 1 was Servaes Knaven, who took the victory last year. But for Johan Museeuw, he's coming up to this very difficult section of cobblestones, a 5-star section of cobblestones, 1,000 meters, and this is really where Georgie Hincapie has to try and nail back some of that advantage of the flying Belgian.
Yes, and let's hope that there's no bad luck for the riders too, because this race is never over till you've finished. There is so much can happen. As Kenny Kuiper, as Sean Kelly, Eric van der Oord, the big names of the past, as we get a little bit of problems on this sector of cobblestone here with our pictures. But there's the gap, 50 seconds it's gone out to now, as Johan Museeuw pushes on over the cobblestones, and the crowd are cheering him through. He's riding in the safest possible place, if there is such a place, and that's in the crown of the road, and he just flies over these cobbles.
He flies over these cobblestones, but in fact the year that André Schmiel won Paris-Roubaix, it was on this section of cobblestones that Johan Museeuw rode to within 20 meters of the flying Russian on that day, and he couldn't bridge the last 20 meters, and then he blew up and went on to finish in second position at the end of the day. Hincapie and Boonen now are on the same section of cobblestones as Johan Museo, but these two riders still working well together. It's a brilliant ride, Phil, by this young 21-year-old. He's absolutely marvellous today. He's put an awful lot of effort in this bike race to stay at the front. He's only 21 years of age. He comes from Balen in Belgium, and he's actually leaving Hincapie behind at the moment. It is absolutely brilliant. This man was 7th in the 3 days of La Panne and 24th in this year's Tour of Flanders.
Well, it has been a sensational debut for this first-year professional. Whatever you think, he is a star of the future. Reminds me of the arrival of Eric van der Orden, his first year as a pro, and of course the great Eddy Merckx, two other Belgians. Real find he is. We're back with the leader now, though, at 36 years of age. This is Johan Museo. The waters part for him as he races this 1,000 metres. The next section of the cobblestones are 400 metres. They're all included in this sector 5, 5A and 5B. He's off the 1,000 metres and he's racing now up to the second sector. He doesn't look like a man about to falter, does he?
He doesn't look like a man who's going to crack. You see, when you get to 36 years of age and you've been a professional for an awful long time, you know how to judge your body, you know how to judge the effort, and that is exactly what he will be doing right now. He will be measuring his effort all the way up to the finish line. This man, let's not forget, turned professional with Greg LeMond's team ADR back in 1989, and he was one of those unbelievable bike riders who dragged themselves round the Tour, but since then he really has, Phil, become a specialist of the one-day classics.
And there's the Belgian flag to the right, French flags to the left, and an American and a Belgian rider parting the ways here. And they are riding to the limit of their ability right now. And I don't think they got the answer to this rider, who's now on to the second sector of 5, which is 400 metres. Not quite so long as last time. And another little sector can be ticked off by Johan Museo, who looks to me to be heading for his 3rd victory in Paris Roubaix. He's not making any mistakes thus far, but can George Hincapie fight back?
Well, he's come off that section of cobblestones there, Phil. Absolutely superb. The speed that he was going over the cobblestones, it seems to me to be faster than he's going on the good roads. He accelerates because he knows that's the area where he can open up his advantage. Very much like the climbers do in the Tour de France. They accelerate on the slopes of the hills because that's where they put the hammer down and create their advantage over the rest. 23 kilometers to go, but Museo today is certainly on an incredible mission. He was very upset at not winning the Tour of Flanders for a 4th record time. He wanted to do that, and now Hincapie and Boonen are losing time consistently as we continue with this bike race. They are almost 1 minute behind Johan Museo right now, and Museo is doing the ride of his life, and another proud moment for him, I think, when we come up to the stadium in a short while, because Hincapie seems to be a little bit weaker than his own teammate Boonen.
Well, there's more word of advice from Wilfred Peters here, as he will be told he is riding away from the two who are chasing, Hincapie and Boonen. If he keeps this rhythm up, he's going to win by 2 minutes in Roubaix, and what a way to celebrate the 100th edition of this remarkable event. He's still full of fight, but of course, Paul, there's still some really rough sectors of Pavé, and we would never wish it on him, but he will know and he will not feel safe till they're all behind him.
He won't feel safe until he starts cruising down the road into the outskirts of Roubaix on that little climb out of Hem. If he comes there with 1 minute, he will know that the bike race is completely and utterly over. But there are, as you say, Phil, a couple of very dangerous long sections still to go. Section 4 to go at Canfin-en-Pévèle is a very difficult one, and it will be made even more treacherous today. There is the TGV, the Train Grand Vitesse, and today that is very much like the performance of Johan Museo, who will be happy to see that sign indicating 1 minute advantage.
Yes, that train can course at more than 200 miles an hour, and he doesn't go quite that fast, but it might feel like that right now. Johan Museo then heading into the last 20 kilometers. The face now of George Hincapie, caked in the mud of the day. It is now locally coming up towards 5 o'clock. They have been in the saddle now for 6 hours, slightly more. And an American, the hot favourite, alongside the other hot favourite, Johan Museo, are one-on-one with the great intruder, Tom Boonen, doing the ride of his young life.
brilliant performance by this young man. He's digging deep, he's trying to help George Hincapie, but maybe the pressure of Paris Roubaix has affected Hincapie today. They've not been able to keep themselves in contact at all with Johan Museeuw, who right now has an advantage of 1 minute, and the way he's riding, I don't think Lady Luck is going to bring him any ill luck at all, because when you've got that form, you really do ride well. You know, Hincapie at 28 years of age, Phil, really has matured now. He lives nowadays in Greenville, South Carolina, but in Paris-Roubaix his performance has been absolutely superb. Last year he was 4th, 2 years ago he was 6th, in 1999 he was 4th as well, but he's always finished this bike race. It's absolutely superb. He started back with a 31st place back in 1994.
As we move here now to what is in effect the third group on the road, there's Stefan Westermann still fighting out for a high finish. He finished 7th last year after the trouble he had with his shoe cleats. Also in this group is Max van Heeswijk, although I think he's pretty hurt by that fall he had on his right side. Also Thierry Gouvenou is the leader of the big mat, and that's how he's riding today. As we look down here at a very famous name, Eddy Merckx, who's built this bicycle, and the very famous man is pedaling it towards Roubaix better than anybody else, as Wilfried Peters continues to advise Johan Museeuw. Well, a year ago, Peters was in the thick of the action at this stage of the race. Now he's in the car telling him what to do.
That's amazing. It really is remarkable to see Wilfried Peters. A great domestique, I think, for the team over many, many years, and a superb personal family friend of Johan Museeuw. It must be quite strange for him right now, Phil, I think, to be riding up alongside the man that he used to share a room with when the team moved around Europe. And I'm sure they still will go a long way together throughout the rest of their lives. But for the moment, he's doing a brilliant job as a team manager. He's keeping his man informed as much as possible. He's coming up alongside to keep the riders' morale as encouraged as possible. We're now out of the area near Sizouin, and very shortly we'll be coming on to the next long section of cobblestones. These guys know these roads so well, Phil, and what Johan Museeuw will be doing now, he'll be looking for a small white cottage on the left-hand side of the road, and he will know that is where the left-hand bend is to go into the 4th section to go, the section at Quinfin-en-Pévèle.
Well, that's a big stretch of cobbles he'll need to get out of the way as he goes past now the panneau, the sign there for 20 kilometres to go. 20 kilometres in the lead. He's still got to go the same again if he's going to stay in for first place at the finish. But the gap is stretching now quite dramatically. 1 minute and 21 seconds now to these two riders who are clearly not riding as quick as Johan Museeuw. Tom Boonen can't have much left. He just can't. And it's going to be left now to George Hincapie, I feel. Looking here at George Hincapie, I think that he's also feeling rather jaded now. They've got to stick together, these two, stay in tandem. This is still a magnificent result. Two riders from the same team taking 2nd and 3rd would be a sensational result for US Postal, and in particular for George and of course for Tom.
It would be a brilliant performance, but looking at Hincapie's pedaling action right now, I think psychologically he's a bit broken there by that move of Johan Museeuw. Museeuw attacked absolutely viciously when they came onto that very difficult section of cobblestones and opened up an unbelievable gap very quickly indeed. This is the left-hand turn. This is the one that Museeuw knows. This is where in the past we saw Andrea Taffy puncture coming onto the cobblestone section and get a spare wheel from a team mechanic who was positioned perfectly for his wheel change. But Museeuw now, Phil, is riding unbelievably over these cobbles, and he really does seem to accelerate once he gets to the cobblestone sections, because he knows that is where he's building up on his advantage all of the time. There are no signs of weakness at all in this man right now. He's superbly powerful. He's timed everything to perfection. His attack was a very good one, and since then he's done nothing more than build up on that advantage over the chasing two, Tom Boonen and George Hincapie.
Well, just watch him as he sits there, pushed right back on the saddle, holds tightly the center of the handlebars, rides the biggest gear he can turn. That's the most comfortable way to cross the cobblestones, and he just drives on. He flies over these cobblestones. Watch the wheels here as they jump up and down on the stones. You can see from the chain the rough ride he's getting.
This is a 5-star section of cobblestones right now, and this man at the front, Johan Museo, is absolutely storming away from everybody else in this year's Paris Roubaix, the 100th edition of the Queen of Classics.
Well, we're looking now at people who are in a very advantaged position here to watch Johan Museo continue to push on to lead Paris-Roubaix. It's not going to be much further before he's got himself a lead of 2 minutes here. We are on sector 4 now, Canfin-en-Pével, and this is the sector which is a vicious sector of cobblestones. And if Museo can get through this without any problems, then I think he can really start dreaming of a third victory. He's showing no signs of slowing down, and he rides these cobblestones with the skill of an acrobat.
Unbelievable. You see his bike is hardly moving at all there. The cameramen are having a hard time keeping their cross motorbikes up in a straight line. But Museo has got the power today. This is a very dangerous corner at the top end, and this is the corner where a few years ago my best man Alain Bondu dropped his bike when he was in the leading group with Sean Kelly. Kelly went on to win on that occasion, but look at the time gap. I think it's pretty much all over for George Hincapie now, because this man at the front, Johan Museo, has a 1.5 minute advantage over the two-man chasing group, and at 1:45 now is the group containing his teammates Max van Heeswijk and the other man who was in there as well, Enrico Cassani.
18 kilometers to go, and he's just hoping and praying now he has no mechanical problems, no flat tires. It makes me wonder just how these wheels and tires stand up to conditions like this. There's George Hincapie and Tom Boonen still locked together. If Boonen survives this and takes a place at the finish, Paul, and then a breakaway like that going at 31 kilometers, so a break of some 230 kilometers, to me would measure with the time that Thomas Wegmuller was beaten by Dirk de Mol after a race-long break.
Who just happens to be this young man's team manager. Exactly. And the man who's looked after him when he raced for the Kortrijk amateur cycling team. Dirk de Mol has looked after this young man, and he's always expected him to come to the top of the sport of professional cycling, but what he needs to do is to look after him carefully over the next couple of years and not burn him out too much and not put him in too many big races, because after all, he still is only 21 years of age. This man, on the other hand, is 36 years of age. He had told us this was going to be his last Paris-Roubaix. He had told us this was going to be his last year as a professional, but who knows? I heard that story once before. That was back in 1996, and there you can see Hincapie having to get round that car there. In fact, there seems to have been a slight accident, and I would think that's the car of Bernard Hinault, and this is George Hincapie stopping at the side of the road, pushed on by the spectators. But Phil, once you lose your momentum, it's very difficult to get it going again.
Well, George is struggling here. That's unlucky. Obviously, there's been a bit of a problem with the vehicles on that bad corner.
Well, Phil, actually, look here. In fact, that's Hincapie. This is a replay of what happened just a few seconds ago. Hincapie on the inside went off the side of the road and into the ditch, and he's now wallowing behind on the road behind his own teammate, Tom Boonen, and it looks as if sight and sound has gone out for George Hincapie. He just can't get going again. I think he's totally demoralized. Let's look at that again.
Well, this is a real shame here. All of a sudden, things gone wrong for Georgie Hincapie. Down into the ditch, thank heavens. It was a nice grass landing there for George. He's up and out of it, but now it is his teammate who's had such an incredible Paris-Roubaix, Tom Boonen, who is now again fighting out for a high position for US Postal. Now, he went away in that early breakaway as the watchdog, waiting for Hincapie to join him. It was all going according to plan. Hincapie was there. Now Hincapie is down, and that's a real shame. We're looking here now at George trying to get back.
Well, you can see there, and this is the man who leads the bike race still, Johan Museo. Phil, he's going to go into the Pavé de l'Arbre right now. This is really, for me, the last difficult section of this year's Paris-Roubaix. It will be indicated 3 sections of cobblestones to go, but this is the last real hard section. He's right now almost ready to take that right-hand bend into this section of cobblestones. In this area around here, they call this the Pavé Bleu. They are blue granite, these cobblestones, and they are oh so slippery, 2.1 kilometers long. This is a 5-star section of cobblestones. It's categorized number 3A. There's another section after this as well, but Johan Museo now is absolutely flying towards victory.
Well, what a gamble he took, Paul. 40 kilometres out, going like that from the group. He must have felt at the time tremendously strong. These are glacial now. This is the area where people know that Paris-Roubaix over the years has been won and or lost. That's why there's so many of them here. But the Belgian flags waving here, remember, we're on French territory, but we're not very far from the Belgian frontier. And this rider, the line, is roaring again.
He's roaring again. We're not too far. 16 kilometres to go to the finishing line. And just look at the way he rides these cobblestones, Phil. He's got his hands right in the middle of the bars. The reason for that is to allow the front end of the wheel to move around just a little bit and find the smoothest line over these cobblestones. And in fact, if you can look closely there, you can actually see the front end of his machine is bouncing over the cobblestones. This man has still got loads of power left. He's got a couple of dangerous corners to negotiate, and then the long drag up to the Café de l'Arbre, the little cafe that only opens up once a year just specifically for this bike race.
He is working so hard here. His handlebars constantly correcting the slide on the back wheel, because these cobblestones are totally treacherous now. Concentrating, pushing with every pedal rev. He knows now that he's on for the victory again in Paris-Roubaix. What a year to win the 100th. Now look at this. At the back here, it looks like Tom Boonen has been joined by... No, this is Weisserman catching George Hincapie. Now, can Hincapie get on the train? This is a great recovery from Weisserman. Remember, this is the rider, Paul, who last year had so much trouble with his pedal cleats.
He had a terrible time in Paris-Roubaix last year. The situation on the road right now is this man leads, the Flying of Flanders, Johan Museeuw. Second place on the road is Tom Boonen, the teammate and domestique of George Hincapie. He's around about 2 minutes behind right now. And then in third and fourth place on the road, it's Hincapie and Stefan Weisserman. But look at the state of that machine. It's absolutely filled with mud, and this man is just powering it along. Another difficult corner here. Watch him go round. This is the kind of corner where you can throw Paris-Roubaix away and absolutely lose it. I tell you what though, Phil, this man is gliding around these corners. It just goes to show the agility is still in that top part of his body.
What an association Johan Museeuw has had with Paris-Roubaix over the years. A race which nearly claimed his life. Now he's come back to beat it, conquer it, tame it. Say what you will, but this man is racing as if drawn to the finish by a magnet. There's no one going to catch him barring problems now, because he is simply pulling away from them. Tommy Boonen is the most likely to succeed. Weisserman is inspired. He's come through the field. He's picked up Hincapie. He's split the US Postal Boys, and they've had their fair share of bad luck today as well. But thank heavens Hincapie has got up. There's still a chance for Hincapie here. He still could take second place. There's the time gaps. There's no way now they're going to catch Museeuw.
I don't think they'll catch Museeuw, but in fact there was only 7 seconds between Boonen, who we can see a long way down the road here, and then the group behind of Hincapie and Weisserman. But the Lion of Flanders right now, Phil, is picking his way up to the top of this course, and then he will have a small amount of tarmac before he hits another cobblestone section.
So Johan Museeuw sees the clearly now, through the mud at least. The road ahead to Roubaix is for him, but the question is, can he hang on?
Absolutely remarkable. This man is the man of the classics of the 90s. He really has dominated the one-day races. He's come up and won the ones that he loves the most. The Tour of Flanders, he wanted to win it a 4th time. It looks now as if he's going to win Paris-Roubaix for a 3rd time. And Phil, with the power this man has got right now, I cannot believe he could even contemplate abandoning the sport and retiring at the end of this year.
Well, let's not forget too that the World Road Race Championships are in Belgium. He's got to stay on for those now. It would be unfitting if he didn't. So Johan Museeuw steadily coming now towards the end of sector pavé number 3, leaving just a couple of stretches to go, and the main problems are now behind him. And indeed it was the man George Hincapie who went into the ditch. Rather a spectacular pile-up, and it has damaged now a podium position for him in this year's Paris-Roubaix. Let's hope he can do it, because he's got Stefan Weisserman for company now. This man, though, seems assured of a victory in a few minutes' time.
This is the unfortunate thing here, Phil, about this Pavé de l'Arbre, because you think you've come to the end of the cobblestone section, you get a small section of smooth road in the middle, and then you have to ride again. This is Stefan Weisserman, and I have a funny feeling right in front of him there will be Tom Boonen. but you can see the road conditions out here at this year's Paris-Roubaix. They are absolutely and utterly atrocious. They change in just 24 hours, and probably not even 24 hours, because it was only this morning that it was announced the rain was coming down over the northern part of France. Weissermann has recovered quite superbly, because at one stage he was more than a minute behind George Hincapie and Tom Boonen. There is Boonen a little bit further up the road, and quite soon he will get caught by the flying German.
Well, what has happened then to George Hincapie, who was briefly with him? And that, you know, looks to me like the style of George Hincapie there. But if it isn't, then of course it is the other man, and it is Tom Boonen. So Boonen is coming back to Weissermann, who is making up for all of his bad luck he got in this race a year ago when he finished in 7th place. So in the end, it was not Museu who was having all the bad luck. It was indeed Boonen and Hincapie, thrown off the line by what appeared to be a couple of skidding cars, and now they have been put into a position that they are totally on the defensive, and it's Weissermann who could be coming up here for a fine 2nd place.
Well, it seems as if everything has gone completely upside down for Georgie Hincapie, and he will have a bitter psychological blow because of that. He will have felt that he was going to ride into a podium position when he was riding alongside his teammate Tom Boonen, but right now he is on the defensive, and if he can perform over the next 15 kilometers, he can still put in the performance that he put in last year and finish in 4th place, which is where he is on the road right now. But for Johan Museu, he took the race by the horns. He's totally dominated the attacks, and he's moved almost 2 minutes ahead of what will shortly be a new 2-man group at the back. Tom Boonen and Stefan Weissermann in 2nd and 3rd place at Paris-Roubaix at the moment.
We're looking now briefly there at Tom Boonen, who has just entered the pavé sector 3B at Gruzon. And that's a sector of 1,100 meters, but Boonen is being chased down by one man now, Stefan Weissermann of Team Telecom. The gap is 2 minutes to this rider, though, who's sailing to victory now in the Paris-Roubaix, the centenary edition, and Johan Museu can begin to dream, because he doesn't have much ahead of him now in the way of bad terrain, and he just has to worry about his form, and I think he shouldn't worry about that.
There's no signs at all of any fatigue there. Looking at the face of Museu, Phil, it's complete concentration. He knows what he has to do. He will know the final kilometers of this race to absolute and utter perfection. He knows he's got a couple more sections of cobblestones, but nothing really to worry about at all. All he has to do now is hope that there are no flints in those tyres of his, and he won't have any flats at all, or no mechanical incidents. But even if he does, he's got plenty of time to change and repair and make sure that he keeps riding this solo ride towards the finish line in Roubaix. 12.8 kilometers to go, over 2¼ minutes to Boonen and Weissermann, who will soon join forces together behind. But there's no change at all in the face of Johan Museu at the front. He's absolutely now dedicated to one thing: staying off the front of this bike race to get himself to the finish line.
Well, he's had some wonderful results in his career, but this has got to be the best. A total show of defiance, going at 40 kilometers to go from the line, and he's just ridden away from the stars. And remember, he had to fight his way to the front as well, and then show them all how to do it. Every time he senses that the speed is dropping, he jumps out of the saddle. How fitting after 100 years too. He's riding a bike built by the most famous name in Belgian cycling, and indeed in the world. 2:20 is now the gap. That's music to his ears for the ex-world champion. You can see the rainbow stripes to his edges of his shoulder, of his sleeves. That's what they mean. Now back down the road, our camera's a little bit covered in mud here as we come off the same sector of pavé. Tom Boonen looking over his shoulder. I don't know where this man has got his strength from today, but he has ridden the race of his young life as well. In the lead since kilometer 31. He's now facing about 14 more to go to the line. Stefan Weissermann, a great friend of the English. He's always worth a chat, and he always enjoys his bike riding. He's now looking for a possible 2nd place here, but that rider from Belgium, Paul, will not give up.
He won't give up at all. He'll ride his heart out right now because this is an absolutely magic start to a career for a young 21-year-old. He has got the possibility of climbing onto the podium at Paris Roubaix in his first attempt at the senior edition of this bike race. He will get joined very shortly by Stefan Weissermann, but don't discount him pushing Stefan Weissermann all the way to the line when it comes down to a sprint. I just keep my fingers crossed now for the young Bonin, because he certainly now deserves to climb into the top 3 places of the position at the finishing line. But for Johan Museeuw, this is almost a march of honor for this man who's had an absolutely brilliant career. Started off as a sprinter, a bunch sprinter in stages of the Tour de France. He won some of the most beautiful ones, the one at the Mont Saint-Michel, and of course the final one on the Champs-Élysées as well. But just now all he's thinking about, Phil, is riding down into the finishing straight here in Roubaix. He's got 2 more sections of cobblestones, but you can hardly really count them, because the section at Hem, although it's 1.4 kilometers in length, it's got a nice piece of tarmac to the side, so Museeuw should not have any more problems at all.
Well, Boonen is still losing. Another 11 seconds has been lost there. The remnants of the breakaway we are hearing is now 4 minutes behind Johan Museeuw. We've lost the location of Hincapie at the moment. I think that's probably because we've run out of mobile cameras here. And the situation is Museeuw, Boonen at 2:20, and closing in on Boonen is Weissermann. But Hincapie, we are presuming for the time being, is still riding in 4th place. Now let's have a look at this. 10 kilometers to go, 6 short miles to the finish now for Johan Museeuw, and the sun is beginning to come out. It's going to be a marvelous time when the Belgian comes home to win Paris-Roubaix for a 3rd time.
Stefan Weissermann has done an unbelievable recovery, Phil, because he's one of the riders who was caught out in a lot of mechanical incidents early on. He was also on the ground a few moments ago as well, but he's now slowly but surely ridden himself back into this bike race. He's looking at a podium position. He makes the junction there with the man who was in 2nd place on the road, Tom Boonen. Such a shame for George Hincapie, who didn't really seem to be having a brilliant day. He didn't have the legs to follow and bridge the gap up to Johan Museeuw. But Boonen has ridden an absolutely superb race right now, and he's got to dig deep into his resources, because he will, I think, now take 2nd position a lot more often in this chasing group of 2, because he attacked with the leading group of 31 riders just 31 kilometers into today's Paris-Roubaix. As we rejoin now a little bit further down the road, Georgie Hincapie. He's in the 3rd group on the road, and it'd be a chance for us to pull back and just see if he's still on his own or if he's in with any other riders. And in fact, he's with Thierry Gouvenou right now. So Hincapie has been caught by Thierry Gouvenou, who's putting in an absolutely superb ride. Another survivor of that leading group of 31 riders who got away early on to dominate this bike race. But for Hincapie, the dream of winning Paris-Roubaix has completely disappeared in the last 20 kilometers.
Well, it's sad, but it is this great bike race, and George Hincapie is now going to have to find if he can take on Gouvenou and claim the same place he finished last year, which was in 4th spot. And I'm sure, and I hope, he hasn't lost too much in the way of his will to get to the top in this race. He's had to take the blows at the most psychologically worst time of the race today. And right up front is Johan Museeuw, pulling clear of everybody on the roads of Paris-Roubaix today. Looking at the face now of Johan Museeuw, sprinkled with the mud of yet another day in this wonderful classic, the 100th time we've had this event. The situation on the road, Museeuw leading by over 2.5 minutes now. Tom Boonen in the pursuit of his life with Stefan Weissermann, and behind them is Hincapie teamed up with Gouvenou, and it looks, Paul, as though the gap for the 2 chasers now is nearly 3 minutes.
It's stretching all of the time. The official gap is 2 minutes 45 seconds. Georgie Hincapie is in a group of 2 riders just a little bit further back. He's in 4th position on the road with Thierry Gouvenou, but they are currently around about a further 40 seconds behind the men in 2nd and 3rd position. We're now going to come up to the penultimate section of cobblestones, 2 to go, but really, Phil, at the end of the day, this is the last proper section of cobblestones, the section at Hem, 1.4 kilometers.
And that's where we are now, just 7.4 kilometres from the finish. The sector at Hem, 1,400 kilometres. And then all that remains then is the little bit of cobblestone as we approach the stadium itself. So Johan Museeuw, a gap of 2:45 now, and the rest of them are really out of it just now.
Georgi Hincapie, Phil, at 3 minutes 35 seconds. I think psychologically he's fallen apart after that crash there, where he found himself plummeting to the bottom of one of the dikes at the side of the road, going up all of the time to the second group. Museeuw must be feeling music in his ears right now as he realizes, and there's Hincapie getting caught by Lars Mikkelsen, Tristan Hoffmann and the two Domo riders. There is Enrico Cassani wearing number 2, Max van Heeswijk wearing number 8. So basically for Georgi Hincapie, his big dream of winning today has gone out of the window completely. But at least for US Postal Service, they should almost certainly have a man on the podium, and that will be a man who had expected to work his heart out today for Georgi Hincapie. Tom Boonen, the 21-year-old Belgian, is riding the first Paris Roubaix of his life to absolute perfection.
Well, George is going to have to pick himself up there, because it is very unfortunate. He gave this race everything today, and bad luck has stopped him in the pursuit. Otherwise, I think he'd still be up there with Tom Boonen, and probably Stef Wesserman wouldn't be. But that's the way this race is. This man did it right. He went out front, he attacked, he took the whole race on. It was a big gamble to go 40 kilometres out and some of the worst stretches of cobblestones left. But he did that, and while they've all faltered, he has just gone from strength to strength. Just look at his style here on what is a very ugly right-hand corner there on this sector of cobblestones out at M. But now Johan Museeuw is beginning to smell victory for a third time.
I can't believe the risks that he's taking, Phil. He's flying around these corners. He doesn't need to take those kind of risks and take the kind of risks to extend his advantage anymore, because he's almost 3 minutes ahead of the second rider on the road. But he just wants to build up as big an advantage as possible, because he wants to ride onto the stadium and enjoy his 1.5 laps here. And in fact, for the first time, really, the sun really seems to be smiling on Paris Roubaix. This is the corner just there where he went through, where Henny Kuiper almost lost his Paris Roubaix. He came round that corner so fast he popped the tyre off the rim, and it was absolute chaos for a few moments when he thought he was going to get caught by the route, but he survived. Johan Museeuw now is off that final difficult cobblestone section at Hem. He now is facing around about 6 kilometres to go to the finishing line. A small climb up through Hem to the top of the road, and then he plummets down into the finish for what will be his third win.
Pavé sector 2 now for the group here, riding for second place. Tom Boonen behind Stefan Wesserman. The sensation and behind Johan Museeuw, without a shadow of doubt, of this year's Paris-Roubaix. Boonen breaking away after 31 kilometres, and he's still riding for a podium place. This is Thierry Gouvenou here now, who was chasing with Hincapie, now back in a chase group of 6.
Brilliant ride by Gouvenou to be there. Big Matt actually had a superb start to their Paris-Roubaix today. They had 4 riders in that early morning breakaway of 31 men, and Gouvenou has right now managed to survive. There's a problem here for Thierry Gouvenou at the back. It's a rear wheel puncture, but the car is right up behind him to change, and very unfortunate. In fact, they've decided to opt, Phil, for a very quick bike change as we rejoin the Tête de la Course, the front of the bike race. Johan Museeuw is riding his long time trial here, 40 kilometres to go when he launched his attack, and ever since he opened up the first 20 seconds, he's continued to increase that lead all of the time. His lead now is approximately 3 minutes over Tom Boonen and Stefan Wesserman, who are in second and third place on the road, and Georgi Hincapie right now is in 4th position with a group of about 6 riders.
Just 6 kilometres to go, and trouble for Tristan Hoffmann as well. This race will not lie down, but it's all in favour of Museeuw. He's riding serenely towards the finish, while all of his rivals are having all sorts of trouble.
Well, this race is never over, Phil, especially when you're going over sections of cobblestones like that. But when the form is good, you don't really seem to have that bad luck, which the riders at the back of the race are having for the moment. Johan Museeuw had his bad luck in the early part of this race. He did have an early flat tyre, but he got back into the main field very quickly with the help of all of his teammates. Now he's starting to suffer. Now he can really dig into those pedals as much as possible, but he knows he's not very much more than 7 or 8 minutes away from the finish line. 5Ks to go for him right now in the outskirts of Hem. A long drag up through the town here. Before then, he has a long cruise down into the long straight leading into the velodrome, and this man has dreamed about winning Paris Roubaix again.
Absolutely superb riding, almost a 3-minute buffer now for Johan Museeuw. He can take a wheel and a bike in that sort of time and still arrive in the stadium in solitary grandeur. He is now about 4 kilometres from the finish, just a tad more, as he continues to course through the streets on the outskirts of Roubaix. This has been a fantastic demonstration by a rider everybody thought was now past his best. But one man didn't, and his name is Museeuw. He came here to win this race, but nobody thought he'd do it like this.
Nobody thought he would do it like this, and I think the Belgians might have done, Phil, though, because you know what? I have never seen so many Flemish Lion flags out here as there are on the finishing straight right now.
Indeed they are. The stadium now bathed in sunshine. How fitting for the end of the 100th edition of Paris Roubaix as they await the arrival of Johan Museeuw.
I don't think any of us could have imagined yesterday, when we looked up at the sky to see how blue and clear it was, that this was again going to be a historic Paris-Roubaix. And I think the gods of Paris-Roubaix came down just to scatter a little bit of a wet excitement over this race.
Well, it's made a classic of a classic today. We're looking now at the race for second place here. Stefan Wesserman, his bad luck gone from last year. As we switch now to the rear of the third group, Tirigunu's had his problem. Cassani has also had his problem. The gap is officially 4 minutes back to this group now. There's George Hincapie, Lars Mikkelsen and Tristan Hoffmann. Hoffmann also recovering, and that's in fact Max van Heeswijk going through. He was a faller earlier on. Every one of these riders has had some sort of delaying problem in these last 40 or 50 kilometres of this race.
Every bike rider in Paris-Roubaix today, Phil, will have a story to tell tonight in the showers and the rest of the week when they go back and share it with their family and friends, because this has been a historic Paris-Roubaix. It's the 100th edition of this incredible bike race, and the man who always seems to rise to the very special occasions, Johan Museeuw. This man almost died because of Paris-Roubaix a few years ago when he crashed in the forest of Arenberg and split his kneecap into about 5 pieces. He caught an infection and had to be evacuated to hospital. Then after that, he forced himself back to the top of the sport, and it seemed as if everything was almost over when he was involved in a motorcycle accident. Again, kept in hospital and intensive care, and he fought back from that. He is one of the most incredible comeback riders in the sport of professional cycling, but he is also a very tough bike rider. He's a tough man, and he revels in these conditions which have come down and bathed Paris-Roubaix today.
And it's gone out now to 3 magnificent minutes for this rider, who's recovered from all of the injuries Paul has mentioned, to come back to win Paris-Roubaix, a professional since 1988, and he's now bringing home the 100th edition. It's so fitting that a rider of this stature has taken out this classic at the 100th time of asking. He's never faltered, he's never looked weak, he's ridden the cobbles with the confidence of a man 10 years his younger, and let's hope that Boonen and Wesserman can hang on now to fight out for second and third. The last time checked then, 3 minutes and 1 second, 3 kilometres to go to the finish. Nobody, but nobody now can catch Johan Museeuw.
He's got to be feeling very confident now. It's a big risk attacking so far from the finish, and he attacked 40 kilometres, 25 miles from the finishing line. A little look over his shoulder there, and the only thing that he will see will be the team car of Domo Farmfried, which is being driven by his friend and former very good teammate Wilfred Peters. Peters must be pretty nervous in the car. He must have been over the last 40 kilometres or 1 hour of racing to see and ride up alongside Johan Museeuw. That is the finishing place where he will come in around about 3-4 minutes time. The sun has come out and it's absolutely superb. The race came to town in sunshine, and that really is something we didn't expect a couple of hours ago.
It is absolutely on cue, the sun, the crowd. You can't get a bigger crowd into the stadium today. Anywhere is possible for them to stand. They are standing there. They're watching the same pictures as you are on a huge screen in the center, and they just cheer every time we go back to Johan Museeuw. 2 3/4 kilometers remaining of 261 today. Just look at these crowds now as we race down towards the entrée du Velodrome, the entry into the cycle stadium. There's just one little tiny sector of cobbles will come in the last kilometre before they go onto the track, and they're just laid there really to remind you you're about to complete Paris Roubaix.
What a brilliant performance by this man, and there's no question at all about who the crowd want to win this bike race, whether they're from the north of France or whether they've moved across from Belgium to witness the finish of the 100th anniversary of Paris Roubaix. They all want this man to win because he is a true Lion of Flanders. He ridden today, Phil, like an absolute Trojan. He's dominated this race, and once he got that advantage, I don't think anybody was ever going to pull him back into the fold. And very soon now he will come into the stadium for the final time, and I think he will absolutely enjoy his 1.5 laps here of glory.
And well he should, because he's going to be feeling just so good inside now. The effort was all worthwhile. How he had the courage and the heart to attack with 40 kilometres to go, I don't know. But in a race like this, as he swings on to the Espace C Crouplante, which is the last 300 metres of cobblestone, you just must have gone on instinct. He must have known he had to go at that moment in time. So we're heading down now on this final little stretch of cobblestones. Then we will bounce to the right of them and race into the stadium. There's the kilometre kite, seen before by Johan Museeuw, but seen this time with a daylight of more than 3 minutes to the second rider on the road. Museeuw is about to enter the stadium, which has welcomed this race for the majority of its 100 years to the biggest cheers, I think, Paul, we will ever have heard.
It's going to go absolutely balmy in here in a few moments' time when Johan Museeuw turns in, because the north of France is almost Belgium, and there are so many Flemish flags out here for Museeuw, and here he is right now.
There it is, onto the track, and he's gone wide too. Now steady on, Johan, because it's a bit slippery right there. Very soft from the rain. He's corrected that. This man of great skills is coming on to win his 3rd Paris-Roubaix. He's got time if he wants to equal the 4 of Roger de Vlaming. I don't think he'll do that, but that's not what's in his mind right now. He looks across the stadium as he gets a bell for the last lap. He will also complete this last lap because the other riders won't be on the track at the same time.
They certainly will not. Johan Museeuw has certainly not begun his celebrations right now. He will have finished Paris-Roubaix before the 2nd and 3rd place riders come in. Look at that, Phil. 6 hours, 37 minutes in the saddle. And for Johan Museeuw, he has wiped away the disappointment of not winning the Tour of Flanders last week. But Paris-Roubaix for a 3rd time, well, thank you very much. That'll do nicely.
Yes, 2nd last year too in this race, but 2nd to his teammate Kneven when it didn't work out for Museeuw. He left nothing to chance this time around. Wait for it now as he rides up the home straight. This is going to be the greatest moment, I think, of his life now, as Johan Museeuw has won Paris-Roubaix 3 times. The man who turned professional in 1988. He is the champion of the cobbles again. The Lion of Flanders roars once more. So Museeuw now has time out to watch the sprint for 2nd place. And let's hope it's going to be between Tom Boonen and Stefan Wesserman, because Boonen has been the other man of this race today.
Well, Tom Boonen has done a great ride out on the course, but the man who is celebrating in the centre there, he has been absolutely mobbed, Phil, just about 20-30 metres away from us here by an incredible group of media from the Belgian press. They're going absolutely out of their minds because they wanted this man to win last week, but he's come up with the goods and he's celebrated absolutely superbly here, making this his 3rd win at Paris-Roubaix.
And there he is, 10 fingers showing as he crosses the line. We look down now on the stadium. We can see in the distance the helicopter, and he's picked out the 2 riders who are being chased. They are still together here. Tom Boonen, the new boy, against Stefan Wesserman, who was 7th last year and had atrocious luck, now racing for a 2nd place, and without doubt his finest ever race as well. But he's going to have to take on an inspired Tom Boonen, the man that broke away after 31 kilometres, and now 230 kilometres later he is going to claim 2nd or 3rd and mount the podium as well. And this a professional for a matter of months, and he's going to attack him, and I think he might be a good bike rider on the track.
He very well could be 21 years of age, but it's going to be difficult. It's a hard sprint when you've been at the front of this bike race for so long. 6.5 hours in the saddle for these bike riders, and this is an unbelievable finish to a first Paris-Roubaix for Tom Boonen. The US Postal Service will have a man on the podium, but right now it's a question of, is it going to be second place or is it going to be third?
Well, Boonen's been manoeuvred into the lead here. Westerman will be content with that. It takes, for a road cyclist, a little bit of nerve to ride the Bank Stadium here in Roubaix if you're not used to it. Now we'll see if Stefan Westerman can do something special here. I think he can. He's not going to rush past Tom Boonen. He's going to leave him out there and wait. He's wisely looking over his shoulder across the track to see if anybody else is chasing in. There's no danger of that. And now Tom Boonen is going to have to lead out Stef Westerman. It would have all been so different if we hadn't have had that problem on the pavé that saw George Hincapie crash spectacularly into the ditch, and Boonen was forced to ride on alone and leave his team captain behind. Now he's racing for a place he could never have dreamed of. A top 3 finish as Westerman goes. Surely Boonen can't react to that. This man, though, is a huge star of the future as he chases Westerman. He's not going to close. The legs just cracked. Stefan Westerman comes into the home straight. The German gets second, and the mighty Tom Boonen takes third for US Postal.
Well, a brilliant ride there, but this young man, he had so much fatigue, but Stefan Westerman a little upset there with finishing in second position. It's only a dream of what could have been the situation, and Hincapie now, Phil, is onto the stadium as well, and he'll be looking to try and equal his 4th place of last year, but he's in a group of around about 8 riders, and I would think Hincapie is going to have to do something pretty special to try and get this one, because just in front of him there in second place is Lars Mikkelsen, who is a very good sprinter.
Well, let's hope George can get 4th here. It'll be the 3rd time he's finished 4th if he does, but he has raced so well today. He's promised more all day. Now he's got to take on Raphael Schroeder, leading out Lars Mikkelsen. Mikkelsen now goes. George is hooked up nicely onto the wheel. They'll come round for the bell this time. Tristan Hoffmann is in 3rd place as they come off the banking. 1 or 2 riders here are fancying their chances, and Mikkelsen is deciding he's going to have to go the whole way around the stadium. That is a long way to sprint, and George is going to have to take the others on as they come up towards the line here now. It is Tristan Hoffmann, Lars Mikkelsen, Hincapie, I think, on the line, but I'm not too sure. That'll go to the photo. But George, Paul, possibly a 6th place finish.
A little bit devastated, I think, by that as well, because he'd hoped, I think, for an awful long time that he was going to get himself onto the podium. Maybe just a bit too much pressure on his shoulders there coming into Paris-Roubaix, but I think he will take a lot of enjoyment out of the position of his teammate Tom Boonen, who will climb up into 3rd place at the end of this bike race.
I think you're right, Paul. That's exactly what the way George will feel, but he'll also feel great disappointment. And this man, he was about to become the first German ever, in fact since year 1 of winning Paris-Roubaix 100 editions ago. My goodness me. Well, he didn't. He was second. A little wave there from the man from Belgium, who's become the new star with his performance today, and well done to Tom Boonen. That was a tremendous ride by him. Here's the sprint again.
Well, this you can see George Hincapie trying to get on terms with Lars Mikkelsen there, but I think George Hincapie, after that crash, went to pieces psychologically. He was hoping and dreaming of the big win today, but that wasn't to be. First man across the line there, in fact, was Tristan Hoffmann.
Yes, and Lars Mikkelsen. And George Hart not really in the sprint. He's been in these positions before. What he really wanted, of course, was a stand on the podium in 3rd place. US Postal, surprisingly, get their first man on the podium of a Paris-Roubaix. Not with the man they expected, but this is a big professional setup, and I suspect that they'll be happy enough with the result today. And Johan Museo. We now know that the 10 fingers mean I have won 10 World Cup races in my career, and he just goes on winning. Well, that's a tremendous result for Johan Museo. Now, let's go and join Tom Boonen and ask him the question. What is it like when you come into the stadium in front of a crowd like this?
It was unbelievable. I can't describe it. You know, I did this race 3 times as an amateur, and I did it 3 times in the first group, but when you hit the velodrome, there's like 50 people, and this is unbelievable. On the road, the people just shouted at my name, and they turned crazy, and then you hit the velodrome, like maybe 3,000, 4,000 4,000 people here, so that's crazy.
And with George Hincapie crashing in the ditch, well, Tom Boonen, he had to try and get the result.
Yeah, me and George was trying to get back to Museo, but Museo was unbelievable today. And then George crashed, and there were some guys coming back, so we couldn't wait for him. And I tried to take it a little bit easier, but I just had to go for it. And then Weseman came back, but in that moment I did 230 k's in an attack today, like in the front, so it's normal. I'm a little bit tired now.
Congratulations, great race.
So a happy man, but what about Lars Mikkelsen? He was right up at the finish, but he in fact earlier on had been involved in a crash. What exactly happened to him?
What happened?
Well, we take a right-hand turn, and because of the spectators I was a little bit surprised. I couldn't see what happened after the turn, and well, I crashed and I had to change my bike, and I think my arm here is not very good condition. I had a hard time, but I was going good today, and well, luckily for me I also finished up in top 10 because I thought at that moment everything was gone.
And a lot of teamwork as well.
That's true. Our team, Team Coast today, were all from the first section of Paris in the front. We had Frank Hoy, we had Malte Urban, we had Stefan Adamson. And I mean, okay, we cannot be on the side like on same level like Domo, but it's still in a race like this that means a lot.
A different result without the crash?
For sure. I mean, at that time I had kept up with Weseman and with Hincapie, and I think with Hincapie and Weseman I still had the chance to go and not get Musso back, but still be second or third.
Thanks
Lars Mikkelsen there showing his Paris Roubaix mud face pack as he now can go and have a good shower. Another man who rode well today and coming in late was Stefan Westerman. Here was a rider who last year had a fair share of mechanical problems. This year seemingly came from absolutely nowhere. But I think, you know, he had a fair share of trouble yet again, didn't you, Steph?
I have a lot of problems today, but I feel so strong this morning, and I think I don't think about in the race. I just riding, I just push the pedal.
How'd you feel when you bridged the gap to Boonen?
The what?
When you caught Boonen, how did you feel when you caught
That's what I say. I don't think in the race. I pass him, and I just want to be on the first three here. Thank you.
Stefan Westerman then off to make his appearance on the podium in second place, Paul, but there's no doubt who the winner was. Emphatic, wasn't it?
Absolutely brilliant. This man took the race the way it's supposed to be taken. Paris Roubaix over the last few years has turned out to be a race of absolute domination, and today Johan Museeuw dominated Stefan Weserman, an unlucky bike rider who may be a future winner of this race, a race that he certainly adores. But I reckon one man we do have to look out for, Phil, is this young 21-year-old from US Postal Service.
Oh, not least Tom Boonen. A little word there for Museeuw. Twinkly Museeuw's eye there. I'm sure he said, mate, you did a fantastic bike race today. So, confirmation of the top three: Museeuw, Westerman, Boonen, Tristan Hoffman coming in fourth place, Lars Mikkelsen fifth, George Hincapie taking sixth. To complete the top 10, Thierry Gouvenou, Max van Heeswijk, Nico Matan and the battling Enrico Cassani. Look at that young face there, smiling to the crowd, standing alongside the line. And Stefan Westerman wondering what might have been, because this is a rider, remember, no German has won this event since the very first edition 100 years ago. And I think that might serve to haunt Stefan, because he really wanted to win today. But he overcame his bad luck of last year, though he still had trouble in his own way. We'll leave you now with the sights and sounds of a brilliant 100th edition of Paris Roubaix. Oh my goodness me, would you like to ride it? I think everybody would. At least they'd all like to win it. For Paul Sherwin, I'm saying goodbye for now. This is Phil Liggett. See you soon. Bye.